republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We need a motion to adopt the agenda. We actually have to pull two items. One is item C off of the consent calendar, and the other is action item A.
So when you say full, you mean remove
From our action.
So which two numbers was that again?
Consent item C and the action item A.
I move we adopt the agenda, pulling item C, job description OAS campus supervisor, off the consent calendar, and item A off of action items, contract with Premier Media Integration for installation of audiovisual equipment. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is adopted. At this time, it is our public comment period. Persons may speak on any item that is not listed on the agenda. Speakers are requested to fill out a speaker card and to state their name and address before addressing the board. Individual speakers are asked to limit their comments for any items not more than 3 minutes in order to allow everyone who wishes to speak the opportunity to do so. Groups are asked to limit their comments to a total of 10 minutes. The board shall limit the total time of public comment to 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. If additional time is needed, public comment will continue after the discussion item. So I don't have any speaker cards. Is there any public comment? Okay. At this time, we will recognize our employees of the month for October 2013. Adriana Ayala and Chelsea Ridenauer as the certificated staff, and Angie Edwards as the classified staff will be recognized for their outstanding efforts on behalf of the school district. Adriana Ayala and Chelsea Ridenauer are our certificated. This month we honor Adriana Ayala and Chelsea Ridenauer as the OUSD certificated employees of the month. Both teachers are being recognized for their contributions to Glorieta's Build Character, Build Success campaign, promoting positive character and fostering community pride. Beyond the character trait newsletter they prepare monthly, Adriana and Chelsea provide staff with lesson ideas, thematic resources, and coordinate the much anticipated Gopher Pride school-wide assemblies as well. We salute their enthusiasm and applaud their standout performance. Thank you. To Angie Edwards as she ventures into her retirement. Can't believe it. Well, we are excited for her to pursue her many passions such as travel, flower arranging, and gardening. We are sad to see her leave Orinda Intermediate School, where she has had a profound effect for the last 15 years as a campus supervisor. Angie has worked tirelessly and enthusiastically to keep students safe both physically and emotionally. Her daily interactions with students, teachers, staff members, and parents have afforded her a more accurate monitor than a supervisor. She's become known as Campus Mom. So, though she may not be here on a daily basis, Angie will always be part of the OAS family.
I'm not gone for good. I'm still dressed code every time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's sweetheart. Thank you.
consent calendar. Do we have a motion on consent, or is there any items?
I'd like to pull one item, item K, please.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so we'll move item K to, will actually come next. Do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
I move we approve the consent calendar, accepting item A and C that we removed earlier.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so the consent calendar has passed. We will now move to item K as our action item.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask to pull item K because it is the monthly budget enrollment update, and because with talk in the news about Prop 30 and changes to school budgets, I wanted to point out, first of all, as a member of the Ledge team, you see at the bottom of page 35, lottery was $27,000 for the regular allotment, now revised budget $8,000, and I just want to point that out because people in the general public often think that schools have money because we get lottery money. Well, it's very little from this. And then I also wanted, I discussed this, asked Lorraine questions earlier, but I just wanted to point out that on the revenue limit line, there is, and the state revenue line, there are changes, and I understand that is because of the funding formula changes, and we no longer have categoricals, and now it's in revenue limit. And since we haven't really discussed that, I just wanted to bring it up. Did I say that correctly, Lorraine? Okay, thank you.
So you're saying it's just a recategorization of state versus?
Yeah, instead of more money on the state line, because the way we used to get categoricals, now some of that money is put into the revenue limit line. But there still is a net total bump up in revenue. If you look at the total revenue, 28 million now becomes 30 million. I don't know that, you know, that's, I think there's multiple factors in there, but generally the biggest change is the funding formula and the change in categoricals. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, this item is open for public comment. Is there any comment from the public? Yeah. Any further discussion from the board? This time, we have a motion on consent
I
calendar.
move that we adopt consent item K, monthly budget and enrollment updates.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so consent item K is passed. Okay, this time we will turn to discussion item A, energy audit report by Newcomb, Anderson, McCormick.
Good evening. In September, the board approved an energy audit by Newcomb and Anderson McCormick. They came out, they did a walkthrough of our sites, look where we could save energy, give us some recommendations on saving energy. They looked at HVAC, lighting, they looked at some solar at each site possibilities, and walked every site in our district. So they have a report back tonight, and tonight from Newcomb, Anderson, and McCormick. I have Russell Driver is here, And he can give a little brief summary about the report, and if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer.
Question?
Thanks. Good evening. In our report, we identify a series of fairly basic engineering or energy efficiency projects. They include lighting controls, some fixture and light replacements at the gymnasiums, controllers for portable classroom heat pumps, and variable frequency drives for the HVAC systems at the gymnasiums. We also did look at solar. This is actually one of the few opportunities we get to look at solar and efficiency in an integrated fashion, so I wanted to give you kudos and thank you for opening the scope up that way, because I think one of the major takeaways from the report, which is a little bit towards the end in the just before the recommendations section, we get to show you what solar looks like with and without the energy efficiency work done first. And so we identified energy efficiency projects with a cost of about $260,000 after utility rebates, and identified a solar program with a cost of about $3.3 million. If you combine the two together, the total project cost is $2.7 million instead of what that would be, almost 3.6, and you end up seeing a combined benefit that would be greater than just doing the solar program, or certainly just doing the energy efficiency program by itself. So there's a real opportunity here to do some energy efficiency work first, and then think about implementing a solar program. I would also note that the timing has been good insofar as what's going on with Prop 39 funding, and as you probably know, planning funding can be applied for by the district. There's a deadline of November 1st, just last Friday, and the second deadline coming up in January, where you can use that money to put together an expenditure plan and for funding of projects, and I believe Orinda's allocation is about $500,000 of that funding. So this positions you well to assemble your expenditure plan, to do a little more detailed work, and really figure out what sort of program you want to implement and what mix of projects it might have. But the bottom line, I think, that we found is that there's some opportunity. I mean, your facilities are sort of California classic facilities in terms of what we see all over the state in K-12 districts. So we're talking about lighting, and there's probably some discussion in the district we've caught wind of maybe some air conditioning of classrooms and the like, which is also fairly common. So there's a real opportunity to accommodate all that, at least as a planning exercise, and make sure your solar program, if you implement one, is sized correctly and you're maximizing the benefits from it. So anyway, so that's what we found. The numbers have healthy returns. We did calculate what's called a savings to investment ratio for you in this report, which is what the CEC uses when qualifying projects for Prop 39. The way we calculated the SIR probably isn't 100% consistent with how the guidelines are going to end up. They're still in process at the CEC. So what we've seen in the community college arena, where they're a little further ahead in guideline development, is our ratios, which for these projects, the combined project is 2.5, will drop some. So you probably see, something in the 1.9, 1.8 range, and the threshold you have to hit is 1.05. So projects are healthy. Prop 39 funding would pay for some or all of it, depending on how you want to mix that up. So I'd be happy to answer any questions for you if you have them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the board?
Sure, I'll start. So you just mentioned Prop 39 might pay for some or all of it. Did you mean the energy efficiency portion, not the solar?
Both. In terms of eligible projects, I mean, clearly there aren't enough Prop 39 funds to cover the whole thing, but eligibility should be pretty good. Prop 39 has an energy efficiency first sort of goal or mandate even to it, but they're still working out what that means for you and what sort of case the district would have to make in order to apply the funds to solar. By our look, at least at a high level, the efficiency budget is about $260,000, which would not use your full Prop 39 allocation anyway. So it might work together quite nicely with putting in some efficiency with Prop 39 and funding some solar, a part of the solar implementation as well, if that's what you want to do. So they should be eligible.
Okay, so in my mind, in general, the energy efficiency projects seem like a huge benefit and makes sense. The one thing I was sort of thinking I didn't see in here, and I'm not sure if there's a reason, was more about insulating buildings. Maybe I'm a little old school, but that's what you used to do before you tried to do air conditioning or, you know, other things.
Sure.
So is there a reason that that isn't really?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There really are two things in play here, and one is that in the traditional utility programs, insulation and those kinds of retrofits don't really qualify for the customized utility programs because the paybacks are so long and they tend to be expensive. They do provide incentive for those things, but they're upstream, right? The window manufacturers are discounting that on sort of a unit basis. They can be very good programs with air conditioning, for sure. The other thing is that the building type and sort of era in which they were built, there's a lot of glass, a lot of thin walls, and I think they're going to be challenging and potentially expensive projects, which would drive the payback to be pretty lengthy.
Right, well, I wasn't thinking of doing everything. I was just thinking, for example, at Del Rey, I don't know if there's insulation in the ceiling. That seemed to be one school where there's real heat efficiency problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there may be reason to do some insulation in some places that makes sense, and I'm not, you know, advocating doing everything all over the district, but just kind of looking at, is there certain places where we
Sure.
will do that at the same time?
Sure, that absolutely could be the case. And part of the issue too is, you know, your post-air conditioning world, if you go there, in terms of energy utilization, is going to look a little different than it does now. Right now, the savings aren't really there to be had in a way from a lot of insulation work. It might be more of a usability and comfort kind of situation than something justified purely based on the energy savings. But in targeted areas, oh, certainly, it could make sense.
Okay, and then I also had a question, well, I have speaking of Del Rey, I have a question that mentions the heat pumps, you know, and I forget if that's, I think you talked about, you know, changing that so they're more efficient. I don't really have a great understanding of heat pumps in general, although the rest of this, it seems pretty straightforward. But then, and then the other topic I wanted to know more about was the lighting in the gyms, which seemed to be a problem.
Right. So the heat pumps themselves aren't by their nature inherently inefficient, but they have no controls on them right now at all. So the measure we're suggesting is timers and controls so that they're not running when they shouldn't be. The district has a control system that interestingly runs through the security and alarm system, which is a little bit of a different thing. But in general, it's working reasonably well. There are some time series graphs we have in the report that do show utilization dropping at night and in the summer and when you would expect it to, by and large. But those heat pumps could be particularly a problem because they're probably running longer hours than they should. In terms of the lighting in the gymnasiums, it's really the technology of the lighting. They take so long to warm up, they're almost certainly being left on all day. And in two of the three gyms, there is daylighting, there are clear stories and windows in there. And so if you had better control and better lighting that would be able to be turned on and off, almost certainly you could reduce the operating hours and go with a more efficient technology as well, the lighting itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. And speaking of the gyms, for example, at Glorietta, they have those high windows. That's where my kids happen to have gone to elementary school, and they're not operable. And we talked, you know, in Parents Club a long time ago, and I was actually part of a previous facility committee where we talked about making those operable, and yet, you know, it's pretty expensive. So,
Yeah.
did you guys look at that kind of thing?
Well, I think, I should probably leave this question to our chief engineer at the firm, but my understanding of the gymnasium in particular, where airflow is it's a much bigger challenge there, and there are big fans and there's a lot of air movement around, you typically don't have operable windows in that environment because you're trying to control the airflow, and you have economizers in at least I think at Wagner Ranch, and I'm not sure about Glorieta, which is what I wanted to defer the question to him. That where it's pulling, an amount of outside air in. It's trying to weigh the efficiency of warming outside air versus recirculating and making sure there isn't too much CO2 in the atmosphere and that kind of thing. So those systems tend to be a little complicated and controlled that way, which is why you typically don't throw the windows open when you're moving a lot of air through a facility like that. So there are other building designs that do more of that now, but typically not.
Okay. Well, someone else can throw out some questions.
Sure, I'll jump in on the gyms. Right now, it's my understanding there's no necessarily a meter that tells us what the usage draw is, whether it's from the actual air or from the lighting or from the kitchen or from whatever it may be. We have no.
Correct.
And so that, seeing the spike, it seems like it's probably that Wagner gym that's driving a lot of Wagner's power usage. Do you know, one recommendation that I was thinking would be in here was some more metering to get a better understanding of how we're sourcing. I saw it kind of inherently weaved into the recommendation on how power is then paid for with the city, that piece. But would that be part of that recommendation then, in terms of how do you capture what's truly being?
It can be particularly important in a joint use situation, if I'm remembering, Wagner is a joint use situation where you want to perhaps do some sub-metering. Again, it didn't make it into our report as a formal set of suggested savings measures because it's hard to tie. It might be very important data for you, but you really don't tie that to dollar savings in a direct way. So we're doing a project right now in Sacramento for K-12 where they've got a joint use facility, and we're still trying to figure out whether we should do some metering or model it and renegotiate the cost sharing between the district and the city in that case. So there are a couple different approaches to that, but right now, at least from what we could see, there wasn't a lot of solid data about it. Data would definitely help. You can put data loggers on there for a short period of time, and then model what you think is going on over a longer period of time if that will support your negotiations with the city. So yeah, it could be helpful, and it's certainly something Prop 39 will pay for too, as an eligible project. It just didn't make it to our measure list.
On the vein of metering, outside of that one piece, do K-12 districts look at, given whether it's heat pumps, lighting, and there's all these different sources of use, right? Is metering some part of recommendations? With new construction
typically not.
uses, or?
No, because metering can be expensive, and it can come with ongoing costs. Most K-12 districts, they only have meters that were put in as part of whatever was being built. So at most we see a couple different meters on a particular campus because they have a new building or something. But what you would do is go in with a more detailed audit. This is a very high-level strategic exercise, and that can easily be modeled. there isn't a ton of mystery there. You count the light bulbs. You look at the nameplate rating on the fans and things, and you can get into your total utilization that you get off of your utility bill with a fair degree of accuracy. So unless you have a complicated situation like joint use or something, probably not a huge amount of value in long-term sub-metering.
So it's more about controls then at this point.
I think so. Yeah, we see sub-metering on college campuses and stuff, but hardly ever in K through 12, and certainly not in K through 8, where we are here.
I guess the only other one I had was on the gas use. Let's see if I can find didn't focus on it, so that's probably why it's a question. But trying to understand, I guess, better, given Del Rey's high gas use, and I don't know if this is more a question for Ed, of understanding what, if we could maybe just understand why they would have more infrastructure that's gas heat supported versus the others. I mean, do we have more efficient, are the other schools more efficient in terms of how they heat, or is it just the way this laid out?
The gas use really went up there when we modernized the school and put all the furnaces in all the classrooms. Previously, they were on boilers, and believe it or not, their gas use was low. So it's, I think people just leave the heaters on in the classrooms where they have more control over them. Like Russell says, we don't have great controls during the day. They're just on, and they can go turn the thermostat up and down as they please. So they're probably running the individual heaters a lot longer than we used to run a boiler.
So this goes to more that what you had shared a while back too, of education on usage and shutting lights off or furnaces off, or in this case, we want the heat to crank on early before folks are there, so they're not warming up with the building. Okay. That was all I had right now.
So, if, my understanding of securing some Prop $39 for some of these projects is, for example, my understanding was that if, that we would have to install controls where there would not be control in the classroom over air, for instance, and that we would have to install automatic shutoffs when doors were open or windows were open. Is that, can you clarify or add?
That's not my understanding of what's in the guidelines, no.
Is there anything like that in the guidelines?
No, I mean, what the guidelines have in them today is a set of example eligible projects. So the CEC, I've been to a couple of the hearings now, the CEC staff has put on, and they're not really setting themselves up to come up with an approved project list and judge the projects as they come in from that perspective. But they're saying general things like they don't want to fund behavioral kinds of measures. They want to buy things. It's the Prop 39 money is supposed to be capital improvements by and large. So they want to see you buying equipment and systems and the like. And they seem fairly serious about the savings to investment ratio, cost effectiveness metric that they've set forth. And to stay consistent with the state loading order with energy efficiency first and then you generate after. And exactly how they put all that together when you submit your expenditure plan and say that looks good or try again, I couldn't say at this point in time. But I think, if the tone of the staff carries through to what they actually operationalize, something like this plan that spells out where you are, you do some benchmarking and some prioritization based on the investment ratio or some other metric, and you have a compelling story to tell them that you've done your homework, the sense we're getting from them is that's what they want to see. But I don't think they're going to be forcing, door controls and cutoff switches and that sort of thing.
I really appreciated your report.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Hope it's helpful.
Couple of questions, just more on the gym lighting. I always, you mentioned a little bit in your report, but changing from the metal halide to fluorescent, again, my always thought is, you're not going to see the ball as well and stuff like that. I mean, has the technology come along far enough, in your opinion, that you don't degrade the gym's purpose?
I think so, and again, it'd be a better question for our lighting guy, but my understanding is particularly with the large commercial fixtures, you can get your color temperature and your light quality and fluorescence at a pretty high standard these days. That technology is very mature. It's a lot better than your CFL. I mean, I know a lot of folks struggle with compact fluorescence in home. And it's fundamentally different with the electronic ballast and instant on, all the things that can happen with the bigger lighting systems. Or even LEDs. I mean, if this ends up getting implemented in a year or two, I mean, those costs are really dropping, and you would have some interesting choices I think there. Where we do solar systems and we're having them put in exterior parking lot lighting underneath canopies and that sort of thing, we're doing almost all LEDs now, exterior. So I think what you would want to do is put together some specifications to make sure that you get what you need in terms of lighting quality and not just, you know, lumens or candle heat on the floor. So, but we have seen fluorescent in gyms all over the place, so it should be doable.
And then my other question was maybe more for Ed. Can you just review, I mean, I had that thought beforehand, but then about our joint use agreement, what do we pay for? We pay for all the electricity, how are we operating? That line again?
We pay a percentage, and I think the league has the actual percentage of it. It's, I think during the summer, the city pays 100% of it, and the rest of the time, they pay 2/3.
September 1st through June 30th, they pay 2/3, and from July 1st through August 31st, they pay 100%.
And that's and we do have it broken down of how much just the gym used as far as electricity?
Separate electric meter?
You know, what we did the first year the gym was built, we didn't charge them, we just watched the energy bill, and then we knew at what times it dropped and how much it was in the summer, and that's how we went from there.
Has there been any change in hours of usage or anything associated with that?
No, they use it almost every night till about 10:30.
Do we still keep an eye on the energy use? I mean, are you still kind of monitoring it, or are we just going on? I don't know how much work that is. Okay.
Yeah, we don't monitor just the gym, we don't have a meter.
Oh, so when you were talking about the energy use, you were talking about the energy use for
For a
Wagner
summer,
Ranch School?
right, what it is during the school year and then during the summer what it is, because we use hardly anything in the summer. We just have 2 custodians that are cleaning all summer, so
Oh, okay,
everything during the summer is pretty much their charge.
right. Okay. And then during the school year, they pay for 2/3?
If I could add, if you do contemplate doing something like solar there, I think this issue needs a bit of a deeper dive, because you don't want to pay for a solar system that someone else sees all the savings from, you know? So you gotta get that all straightened out before making that kind of investment.
But the solar, I mean, if the city's just paying for their portion of the gym, and then we have the rest of the school. So it seems like if we were to change that, we're talking about going back and renegotiating with the city what our percentage of utility bill is. If the gym is a smaller portion of the whole school, aren't they gonna argue, well, I mean, I don't know, I don't know, it just seems like questionable whether that would work out, but you know.
Well, all I'm suggesting is we would want to go in and make sure that we have a good understanding of those numbers, and you know, if your goal is to do solar, you'd hope that their percentage would be very low. Otherwise, they should be investing in the solar system to offset that utilization, because they'll see most of the benefit in terms of reduced expenditures on their share of the utilities. So,
Oh, because the gym, the
because that's where the
electricity in
savings
gym is-
come from, is
Yeah,
who's
yeah.
paying the bill. So that's all I'm saying, is we need to
Okay,
really understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
good point. Well, maybe we should talk about solar. What, Chris, were you done, or?
That was good. Actually, one last question. You mentioned the cutoff date for the Prop 39 funding, so that has to be a plan that's submitted, or?
That's just planning funding if you need it to assemble your expenditure plan. So the way Prop 39 works is, in order to get your project funds allocated so you can do projects with, you have to submit an expenditure plan to the CEC for their approval. And so they've made an early release of planning funds available in order to assemble that expenditure plan and get it up to them. And I don't remember off the top of my head what your planning funds number is. I think your Prop 39 number is about $500,000. So pretty small number, I mean.
And is there a deadline on the Prop 39 funds?
To
Or
get the
allocation?
planning funds, there's a January deadline coming up.
What
So,
about in general?
they haven't opened up, no one can submit their expenditure plan yet, so it would be sometime next year. I don't recall when, but you have some months into next year to get that in. And I strongly encourage you to do it, because the first year's, allocation through the state tax collection may be different than years 2 and 3, and, folks talk about it like a 5-year program, but it's dependent on tax receipts. So we know what the first year's allocations are all gonna look like, and you should make sure you're in the queue.
Do you have any rough order percentage of what the expenditure planning piece is in comparison to what folks are seeing for improvements?
I'm trying to think of one we were just working on. It's I think up to 15%. There's a hard cap of your total allocation, 15%. So I think that would make it maybe $70,000-ish for your district for planning money. I would want to go back and double check.
Sure, I'm just asking for a rough.
Yeah, roughly, I think that's what it would be.
It's not 1%.
No. But then, they build it up, they actually set you up to do a lot of detailed auditing, and we're not sure that that's necessary, particularly for a district like yourselves. So I think pretty efficiently you could go through there and get your Prop 39 paperwork in order for probably less money than that, if I had to guess.
Did you have
Our planning apportionment's around $95,000. We did file paperwork to be in line.
Okay, great. And there's no reason not to apply for the full amount, because any unused planning money just rolls over into your project budget. It's not like it goes in.
So if we did apply for the paperwork, at what point do we have to identify what projects we want to do, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's what I can't quite remember. Do you know when the expenditure plans are due? I can't recall. They're going to give you some time to do that, but.
I don't know when the expenditure plans are due, but the planning is the first step. They're still coming out with the guidelines. So-
But presumably it'd be after January?
Yes, definitely. And their final set of guidelines isn't due until December anyway, I think it is. So it's hard to answer some of these questions definitively at this point. They're still working on them.
Okay, well, I have some other questions about solar.
Okay.
If you're done,
Yeah.
or did you want to?
That's all right.
Okay. So, let's see, in terms of solar, I mean, it just seems like it makes sense to do the energy efficiency projects, and, we've had a lot of requests about air conditioning. So if we were, and from your report, I got it that air conditioning is going to increase our utility bills, and I can't remember if anyone said it. It says in your report, what are they, total $270,000 annually in year 11-12, and $200,000 of that, I believe, was electricity, right? So, by the way, first of all, electricity rates going forward, have they increased since 11-12? Do you anticipate them increasing, or did I miss that? Is that in here?
No, we have, in our modeling, we have assumed a 3.5 annual escalation rate on your utility expenditures. That's pretty low. When we do these, we usually assume anywhere from 3.5 to 5% annual escalation in those costs, sort of on a unit cost basis. And the
Okay.
CPUC uses 4.5 when they do their planning.
The
Okay.
electricity rates have been fairly flat.
They've been escalating the last couple of years, yeah, but it's lumpy, I mean, they make a rate case and then you see a 6% jump and then it's, levels off a bit, so, commercial rates have been going up.
So this is off solar, but one thing I just noticed I forgot to ask you in terms of the other lighting, it says, Title 24, you mentioned that in 2014 the requirements change. I'm looking at page 14. It says something about, so if you pull a permit in 2014 as opposed to now, there's a slightly different there's a change there. I don't know, we don't move that fast, so I can't, I don't know if that's a big change, but when someone else was asking about requirements for the state for Prop 39, we also have Title 24, we have to conform to whatever we do. So, I guess there isn't really a question, I just wanted to mention.
Well, I think the thing that it raises that maybe we could be a little more explicit about is that doesn't change, in a way, the value of doing that kind of project to the district in terms of energy savings. What it means, though, is that those permits are pulled after the new Title 24 goes into effect. The incentives are going to disappear for those projects because they do not provide incentives for elements of the building code because they're required. So that's the distinction.
Okay, all right. So going back to solar, so, you know, is there any, if we wanted to do solar in OUSD, do we need to, is there any advantage of considering doing more than one site at a time? Is there a disadvantage of doing one site first and then pursuing it later? That gets into the whole issue of financing the whole thing and all that.
Right,
So
right.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, in terms of cost and constructability, there are a lot of advantages to doing it all at once. If you do it over time, you'll still, for a lot of operational reasons, you will want to work with the same provider or vendor of your solar system. And, you know, if you don't put them through a competitive process up front and push them on that cost effectiveness and lock their pricing in, then it's a little uncertain, at least in my mind, what happens in site 2 and 3 and 4 that you implement after they know they've got you as a customer. When we do these, we almost always utilize Government Code 4217, which in essence permits you to do a sole source, but we use that code in order to run a competitive solicitation using best value instead of low bid, essentially. So we can look at how it affects your bottom line as opposed to who's the cheapest construction price, and we can look at qualifications and experience and all that kind of thing. So my strong recommendation would be to put a program together and to get it all installed at one time, or contracted for all at one time, I should clarify. So if you want to phase the construction, that can certainly be part of your requirement set that you put out there on the street. Again, typically we want to do construction in the summer window. This wouldn't be a big install for most of the solar players out there, so that wouldn't be a problem per se at, you know, even all 5 sites all in the summer. We do more than that pretty regularly, so that's pretty typical. So do it once.
And if you do solar and you've got those panels, do most school districts, when they put in solar, do they put them in the parking lot? Because they're also great as far as shade. Of course, you can shade cars, but you know, where do most school districts put solar?
We're in the midst of a little bit of a shift there. For the past 4 or 5 years, they've almost all been in parking lots because the Division of State Architects won't approve them for roof mounting without so much structural strength and roof penetrations that most facilities people say, you know, I don't want to do that, and you sort of have to put a solar system on a relatively new roof, right? So you just have this beautiful new roof and then poke 400 holes in it, and that makes people nervous, so they tend not to want to go there. DSA has just started permitting some what they call ballasted systems, which are, you know, held up by weights, or ballasting system with some penetrations around the margin and what have you. So we're seeing more roof systems come into play now. But of course, that's dependent on your building being structurally sound enough to hold up that additional weight of the ballasted system. So roofs by their nature are a little uglier, a little more complicated, more review at DSA. So we still see, I would say, 80 or 90% shade structures in the parking lots. It's a little more expensive to build, but it has other ancillary benefits, and there are a number of providers in the industry now who have pre-checked designs that just go to have an over-the-counter stamp out from DSA, and so they can move through the deployment pretty rapidly.
Okay. I guess my other question would be, let me think, in terms of if you go down the path of solar, you know, the whole financing of it, is that, you know, what is the, I'm thinking of what is the understanding in the community in general. It's not the easiest thing to understand all these charts, you know, and to do, you also figure that you're gonna need some repairs or maintenance at some
Yes.
point, you know, you're talking about 25-year looking out, you're gonna need repairs, maintenance, so how does that get handled? What do other school districts do if they do this in terms of, are you sort of putting aside money that you're saving from the energy to use to repair it, or how are you handling that long-term
Good question.
investment stuff?
Good question, because it's a very good point, because these are systems, and if it ceases to run, then you're not gonna get any benefit out of it. So in terms of financing, there are two paths fundamentally that we see districts going down. One is to own the system themselves and finance it in some way. General obligation bonds are fairly common. That delivers more savings, utility bill savings to your general fund than taking some other kind of financing where you would have to prepay the principal with your energy savings as well. So we see it in a lot of bond programs. We also have seen, and there's lots of this because the funding sources have dried up a little bit, qualified school construction bonds, other kinds of low interest sort of tax advantaged funding in that regard. And clearly the way that works is you take your savings stream that we've identified in these numbers and you pay your debt payment with it as you go along. The second path that folks go down is third-party ownership, where someone comes in and finances the system with private money, and they sell you the power from the system. And so that's a power purchase agreement, and you only pay for the power that's produced at a rate you agree to with the provider. That's a nice setup too, because it aligns everyone's interests. I mean, at the end of the day, I suspect you're not getting into this because you want to maintain systems and own all this gear and all this stuff, but that you want to save some money and maybe have some environmental benefits and go a little greener. And you can see a lot of those benefits with someone else owning your system. The issue there is oftentimes the economics aren't quite as good as if you would finance the system yourself, because a lot of public agencies in California have access to fairly inexpensive capital compared to some folks. So there's a new thing coming about too called a prepaid power purchase agreement, where if you do have some money, you can sort of prepay for the power, and it lowers your power rate over time, usually about at the rate the cost of money would increase, right? They'll just discount that cash flow forward and discount it for you. The problem with that, and we can come back to this, I'm sorry if I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be, but you need to know the problem with a prepaid PPA potentially is that most tax-exempt financing does not allow you to use those funding sources for something that isn't an asset that you're going to own. So you have to be very careful with your source of funding. It would have to literally be completely flexible, like general fund monies or something, which is typically not a great place to go for building stuff like solar systems. So that's sort of, there are equipment leases too, and that sort of thing, which are sort of twists on the power purchase agreement. But that's fundamentally the two different ways we see this going. In response to your other question, real quickly, operations and maintenance long term. Most of our clients in California sign an operations and maintenance agreement with the provider to take care of it for 10-year chunks of time. So that literally the district responsibility is picking up the phone if someone vandalized your system or something. But if there are problems with the system, the vendors monitoring will pick it up before you notice anything, because obviously it doesn't look like anything's going on when you drive by it. So they monitor and operate and maintain it.
Okay.
So is that usually like a monthly?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, and it's typically an annual payment or a quarterly payment. And again, we have those costs in our models. We assume that operating costs in the numbers we put together for it.
So why wouldn't you do, if you're going to do solar, do a PPA where you can, see some cost savings, but you don't have to spend any money up front? Or is that like more common or district?
It really depends on what access to funding you have, because what we do when we get closer to actually putting an RFP or something on the street for solar systems is get into the financing with you in more detail and run those scenarios. And so if, again, if you have access to cheap capital, you will return more savings to your general fund than through a PPA. These PPA agreements, they pay for themselves, they give you savings, they're good, they're just, in our experience in California, not quite as good. So that's really the decision. And some districts will go PPA anyway, just because they don't want the asset, they don't want to deal with any of that stuff, and it works quite well for them.
So when you talked about, if we did, you said it was like a 3 million or 3.2 or 3 million, but if we did the energy efficiencies, it would be like 2.7.
Yeah.
So did your analysis include what if we did air conditioning?
We didn't have those numbers explicitly in this analysis. We didn't try to, we didn't have the time and scope to model your buildings with air conditioning and how much, and also no, the simple answer is no.
Impact that would have?
Yeah, and that would have an impact for sure.
So
Sorry.
on the agreements, since a lot of the arrays themselves look to be recommended to be shade structures or some kind of, who owns those in the sense of maintaining?
If it's a power purchase agreement, that would also be the asset of the provider. So.
But
all
it's not a
asset-
PPA, we own the actual,
The hardware.
Yeah, if it's not a PPA,
The
you have
structure.
everything. You have the
Yeah.
copper under the ground,
Right.
you have the inverters, all that good stuff. It's yours.
And then, so with school districts, they don't run into any liability issues, and you haven't seen that come up in terms of who insures the structure?
Not yet. I mean, it's still, even if it's someone else's asset, it has to pass a DSA.
Sure. I'm just looking for if it's in a parking lot, right, and it's.
Right.
Who
There's.
covers it when it gets.
It's a I'm gonna have to think that through a little bit. So if there's an insurable event on someone else's equipment sitting on your property, whose insurance do they go
Right.
after? I can't remember off the top of my head, but every
Probably
PPA
both.
agreement deals with that explicitly.
Yeah, there's
you might
probably an
imagine.
indemnity, additional insured
Something.
hassle going on there.
Yeah, I know in residential leases, the homeowner has to take out additional insurance on the roof, so I bet you it's not far off of that kind of scenario.
Did your solar analysis include the new district office or not? 'Cause I thought you
No,
listed
I don't know.
out, but then you talked about 6 buildings or 6 sites at some point.
Should have said 5, but I said 6.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the district office.
Yeah, I saw the 6 too.
Sorry about that.
But the analysis we had in the facilities plan update included the district office was about the same amount of kilowatts.
Okay, yeah, that's the capacity, could be. I mean, in our analysis, we're really trying to hit the right offset of your current use, somewhere around 80%, so that we can maximize the economics of putting it in. Because what's key to making all this work is switching to a solar-friendly PG&E rate after it goes in. So if you're only offsetting, excuse me, a third or a half of the use of the site, you can't switch over and the economics really start to fall apart. So if you're ever confronting a decision where 80% at 2 sites, or you sort of spread that peanut butter all around, you want to hit your offset. So,
Yeah, so the interesting thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the district office doesn't necessarily, it's not a DSA issue there, so that may be a benefit in terms of building out on that route as opposed to others. So we don't have to go through all the hoops.
That's often the case.
You're saying we could put solar on the district office?
I'm saying that's one of the easier routes to target.
Well, particularly if you have the opportunity to do a little work with whoever's building that facility on the roof to make sure it's solar ready, if you will, that can help too.
More questions?
Yeah, but yeah, I have a question. You know, given that it looks like, I mean, we have huge energy bills, utility bills. The energy efficiency part here, if I'm reading this correctly, on table A on page 4, it looks like if you did all these projects, it's $285,000. On that column where it says project cost, right? So, that's, you know, a lot less than the solar investment. I'm wondering in general, I know this item is on for discussion, but if we wanted to pursue these things, what is the next step? I don't know who that question is for, you or Ed or what. But is this, you know, there's the energy efficiency, there's that, and then there's, you know, the topic of air conditioning, which isn't really included, but that relates to solar. If we wanted air conditioning, how do we, you know, I don't know if you have an idea of what it would cost to put in air conditioning, or we have to get proposals, or what, and then if we wanted to do that and we wanted to pursue some solar, you know, I assume that that would mean if we had air conditioning, we're gonna need more, what do you call it, you're gonna have to have a bigger system to cover the increased electricity, so then you would have to what would be the next step in all of that, the air conditioning and the solar, if we wanted to pursue that? Could you explain?
In general, what you would need to do is sort of take the next step in terms of defining those projects so that you can contract for their implementation. So there's a little more scoping work that needs to be done in order to get to the point where you can contract. The other piece of that is I think the district needs to determine what sort of strategy you want to use for that contracting. There are energy service companies, ESCOs, who will come in, finance the whole thing with private money, do your project as a turnkey. That's more expensive. They quite a sort of project management overhead premium with those deals. But it gets done, it can oftentimes get done very quickly, and it's a way to get things moving, and they can be very good for some clients. In terms of the air conditioning, I mean, one of the reasons we didn't really tackle it head on is that again, there's a lot of scoping that has to be done before you could sort of put a cost on it. You know, how many rooms, what kind of conditioning do you want to put in there, how's it all going to work? You know, and we can work with Ed to help figure that out, if you folks would like. So, but it's really just about defining, scoping, locking it down, and then you key the solar sizes and systems off of your other package of things that you decided. That doesn't mean that one has to follow the other in terms of implementing, but as a planning and scoping exercise, I think you need to know what you're doing with your air conditioning, and you need to know what you're doing with the efficiency, because the worst thing you can do is put in too much solar and give that power away to the utility. And you know, all these numbers that I've put in front of you, the bottom falls out of all of them if that's the situation you find yourself in, because they will not compensate you for anything near market rates for that power if you're overproducing.
You can plug in a lot of electric cars then.
A lot.
Right. Well, I don't know how anyone else is feeling, but it seems to me like we should, you know, want this energy efficiency thing to either come back or move forward at some point, but maybe we need to wait till the next meeting, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Well, this is a discussion item, so maybe it needs to have a discussion now and then determine what we want to do as our next step.
Right, but this is all in time, we're all together discussing this before the next meeting. Yeah.
Well, so to answer your question on, well, my understanding of the next step for call it the efficiency projects on table A, my understanding would be those would then get reviewed and discussed in terms of how we could pursue the planning money. And that really, the planning money that we're already going after as a district, those things would fall into that discussion in terms of formulating the plan, right? And whether the follow-on to that, because it sounds like these are prime ones to do in order to leverage, whether it's air or controls or other further solar, any other Prop 39 funds that we want to go after to, because if we have half a million and this is say 285 plus or minus with some range, I mean, there's still some sort of project out there that can be accomplished. So that's how I guess see the next step is trying to get a plan together to submit for said projects, which involves what you brought up in terms of scoping. And whether that goes deep into air and solar, I mean, it would depend on vetting through these and anything else that's out there.
Well, that makes sense. I guess what I'm saying too is, does that need more board direction, or are we talking about Ed, getting together with a few other people and refining this? Do you know what I'm saying? Are you saying that we have to agree and discuss this further in terms of further details and coordinate with Lorene on this application she submitted for planning, or is this something the district's gonna do and bring back to us at a later time, and if so, when? It just feels like if we have such huge energy bills, and I didn't realize it was that much, that we might as well start moving on this, because everything takes a long time.
Well, I think we would have to bring whatever we, we'll give the direction, whether we want to bring something back as an action item. But now, he's just presenting us and we're getting the information and we're discussing it, and then we'd have to bring it back next month.
Yeah, okay, so
So-
I
well,
would
so
go
the
for
question-
bringing it back next month, but I'm just also saying, is there any more detail?
So the question I hear
Yeah.
you asking, Sarah, is there something already that the district is doing in parallel to this process of the audit or the energy plan preliminary? Obviously, we're submitting, or we have submitted, to earmark that, which is news, which is good news. But is there anything else that's going on in parallel to the month that'll go by? So the next step sounds to be bringing this back in some way to try and,
In December, or?
Right, so after we're done with our discussion, and we can sort of finish up that conversation and decide whether we want to bring it back as an action item for the following month. So sort of, what we talked about having, not just presenting things as an action item and having the discussion, so this is like sort of an example of it.
Okay, but I guess if it's gonna come back as an action item in a future meeting, is there anything else we need to indicate that, or is it gonna come back exactly like this? Maybe that's fine, maybe we discussed it enough, maybe that's what you're saying.
Right, and maybe we can give that kind of direction after we're, as we're finishing up this conversation.
As we finish this, okay.
Yeah, one last question. So if, were we to go ahead and decide we want to put air conditioning in several different places, like you said, that would change some of the economics of how much solar we want to put in and those kind of things. Would that in any way put Prop 39 money at risk as far as, because we're building more because we're adding in electricity usage, or do we just not talk about that when we send a plan to the state?
It's a good question. I don't think it puts funding at risk. I mean, this is distributed to your district based primarily on ADA to do energy projects. And if your load is growing because you've got more students coming into the district, you're building stuff, you're adding AC, that's not unexpected. I mean, they've talked explicitly about these modernization programs, in fact, feeding higher utilization sometimes. So I think that's going to be okay. But again, it's sort of a planning exercise where you're going to have to resize and refit all My chief engineer, when I was talking to him this afternoon about the AC part of potential, is compared to a lot of other districts, we don't think it's gonna drive your electricity usage that much because the weeks are fairly, I live in Moraga, so, I know it does get really hot, but it's not for months and months and months at a time. So with the right set of controls, I wouldn't expect your AC to be running all the time out here, especially, being out of session in the summer. You really need it.
So one other question on the planning funding, or the planning piece, is something of the ilk of categorically measuring, air temperature and going and surveying what the need is on whether it's airflow, air conditioning, or what's existing, or shade areas, or call it in general surveying of your sites. Is that something that's inherent in the planning funding for Prop 39 would pay for?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, it's explicit about what's called an ASHRAE Level 2 audit, which is pretty detailed stuff. Which again,
inside and outside the building?
That's a building, inside building, mechanical building thing. But they also, it's defined pretty broadly. I mean, there are several categories of planning activities that qualify, and I don't really think that's going to be the limiting factor. I mean, I think your staff needs to provide some direction on how deep do you guys need to go and where, and I mean, they obviously have a very good sense of your facilities, and so I generally advise my clients not to use a lot of planning money unnecessarily, because you can build projects with it. So use enough to be able to get your scope nailed down and your needs understood, and get your applications into the CEC, and position yourself for contract instruments. I mean, that's no reason not to leverage that activity to really get you ready to implement, but.
Yeah, because in my mind, what I'm asking about is more of a survey to nail down scope.
Yeah.
And to actually come up with
Well, on
the
the
need definitions.
Yeah, on the solar side, I can tell you, I'm more of the solar side of our house, in case that wasn't obvious when I was talking to you. That, there's some more work that needs to be done typically, but not tons and tons more. I mean, we're not stood out there with a fisheye putting X's through all the trees that bother us, that sort of thing. So it's a bit more work to get you ready to go out on the street to procure a system, but not huge amounts. So, and on the energy efficiency side, it is a little bit different. There's a little bit more work on the building side that have to be done.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were talking about with the right control, I don't think I got the phrasing, but on the air conditioning side, what did you mean by that? With it not being a big cost?
Yeah, and this is always, it's difficult as a consultant sometimes because it's very cultural, and your folks are going to have to ultimately make these decisions with staff. But you can take a very aggressive approach to controls and putting in energy management systems. And I'm sure you've all been in buildings where you have no thermostats and you can't touch anything. And, but boy, it's coming along very efficiently and everyone's really uncomfortable. So, it's a mix. I mean, that's what I mean is to what extent are you scheduling your conditioning or heating versus giving folks thermostats with dials on them and educating them and saying, please.
Sort of like we were talking about before when we were talking about the use of gas at Delray. So people have like individual.
That seems to be a lot of what's going on. And again, it's not a modern building, so you don't know what windows and doors are open as these things are going on and off, and that's just, there's only so much you can do, unless you take more aggressive steps in that direction. That's all about culture and what you all want to do.
I have one more question. Now that I've looked at your drawings in the backs more carefully that show the pictures of the school sites with solar on it, I'm just curious. So they've got these yellow shapes that says L structure, T structure.
Yep.
At the first two schools, and then at OAS there's a green shape and at Sleepy Hollow and Wagner Ranch. What is the green shape as opposed to, it says ground mount. So, I mean, what is,
A ground mount in that case would be low to the ground, no more than 6 or 8 feet off the ground in a fenced area that you know, it's not elevated that you park a car under. It's like a
Okay,
field, a
okay,
solar
it's-
farm, if
right.
you will, on a smaller scale. And that, so in terms of cost effectiveness, roof mount is the least expensive thing to do, and then this version of the ground mount, low to the ground, separated, and then the shade structure, the carports are the most expensive thing to do.
Is that what Alhambra
I'm not sure.
DVC has a.
DVC
parking
has a
lot
very big
has?
carport
In the
system.
parking lot.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
We consulted with Mount Diablo. If you want to see examples of carports, they put car shade structures in 51 different campuses.
So at OAS and the other schools where you have this green shape, the ground mount, is that because you didn't have enough room to do enough of the other, or is it
Not
just because
necessarily.
it's cheaper?
We were identifying opportunities, and in most cases on the campus, we found more physical space than needed to put the capacity in.
Okay.
So that would be a refinement we would want to go through with the team to figure out what you would actually ask for when you went out looking for proposals.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking also is because I noticed at Wagner Ranch, the green shape, the ground mount is actually in what we call the nature area.
Oh.
So that
We might
might,
cross that one off before we.
yeah, that might.
Well, that's exactly the kind of feedback we're getting.
We might want to look at an alternative there.
Yeah, I hear you. You don't want to be doing that, that's for sure. So I was looking for the number and I couldn't find it. but
That's the one on, well,
Yeah,
that's
but
the last picture on that section, Wagner
Right.
Ranch.
right, I just said, thought we found a lot more possible space than we needed. Yeah, so 2.4 megawatts of space, and we only need 700 kilowatts. So we don't need all of those little rectangles and
Okay,
polygons.
great, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? This time we'll open it up to public comment. Are there any comments from the public?
Oh, yeah. Adam Miller, OIS. So Russell mentioned a few things when I was sort of taking notes, and it was, I looked this over very carefully, and it was very good. So the first thing that may not have quite been clear is that under an 8-10 rate tariff, air conditioning could actually have a disproportionate effect on our electric bills. But if you go solar, you switch to a different rate tariff, which is called an A6. And what it does is it allows you to avoid all demand charges. So Russell, when he said it won't affect our usage that much, it's absolutely true. And if it's on an A6 meter, it will have perhaps a 10%, as a ballpark on that. But if you stay on an A10 meter and do air conditioning, it could cause some spikes in peak demand, where they look at your highest usage during a 15-minute time period. And that could have a disproportionate effect on the bills. So I just want to point out, so in essence, sort of solar opens up your options for air conditioning and minimizing any effects on that. Another item was that NAM had a very conservative cost estimate, and I think that's great. I think that's good. So the numbers that you're getting could quite potentially be better. If you look at it in terms of a payback, I believe their estimation was perhaps 13 or 14 years. It is also quite possible, if you look at this instead of a conservative, if you look at it in a range, a very realistic payback could be in the 9 to 10-year range. So it's just sort of in evaluating this, you can look at it in terms of how much money are you leaving on the table if you don't do it. is the cost of a lost opportunity. So it actually, in Russell's case, I believe in NAM, they presented almost a worst case scenario. But it's quite possible and very likely that it would be something better than they projected. You mentioned about the district office, and I think that's should be really, it is important to emphasize. Something very inexpensive now, like, running conduit from the roof to a potential inverter location could dramatically reduce the cost, not dramatically, but it could definitely reduce the cost later on. It would be very inexpensive now that we have access to the walls. So if the solar company comes out and they're doing bids and estimates, I mean, it would be nothing to say, okay, recommend 2 or 3 or 4 things we should do now during construction. Okay, that's it.
Any other comments from the public?
Hello, Steve Ivan, Delray School. Just want to expand a little bit on Tyson's inquiry on the gas use at Delray. A couple other factors that were not brought up was when we were modernized, Delray was the only school that received different furnaces than the other schools. All the other schools have carriers, we got York units. These York units have an energy guide sticker on them, and our energy guide on our furnaces are pegged way down at the least efficient end of the scale. So we basically got a bunch of furnaces that were not very efficient, which could possibly lead to the increased cost. Because at one time we were very low in utility costs, and then we modernized and our costs skyrocketed. So to defend our teachers are not using any more utilities than they have in the past. I blame a lot of that on our inefficient furnaces that we got, which are different than all the other schools received at the time. And another issue with our rooms too, we have those plate windows way up high there. A lot of those are louvered windows. Heat rises, goes right out those louvered windows up high on the wall there. So that's just a couple of points I wanted to add to the large gas usage at Delray. Defend our staff, because I know we're not using any more gas than, or trying not to run the furnaces any longer than any other site. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Any other questions or comments from the board?
Thanks for the heads up on the furnaces. It's good to know.
Yeah, I do have one question. What year was that? Do you remember, Ed, when we did modernization? Like 10 years ago or something?
Yeah, it was spread over what, 4 years, 5 years?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about 2003.
around 10 years ago. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. My personal gut is that, on the efficiencies that he identified, that's a pretty low cost with a good reward, because for $285,000 with the, and with probably 9 million, with the saving, I had it down as like 54,000 a year. So that's something that, you guys feel that to me seems like sort of a no-brainer for us to be trying to get ahead on.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
So maybe our direction should be that, to have that as an action item for next time. Move forward on that. I know we still have the whole task force discussion, so I think, the bigger pieces about solar and all that could be something that maybe we could keep talking as we go forward tonight.
Only because it almost sounds like the solar part has to be the last part, because we want to get the right amount put in, not too much, not too little, so we need to know what we're doing with everything else.
with air conditioning, yeah.
So that whole discussion is sort of our next discussion topic, so,
Well, to stay on this one for a second.
okay.
Given we're gonna meet Title 24 for the district office, and I think it's important to understand what our prediction based on the current design, because there is an MEP design. I mean, they're basically building out specific units, lighting, everything. I mean, it's close to defined. And I'm for offsetting the costs, operating costs, because I know there's gonna be air conditioning in pretty much that entire space. And there is a solar opportunity, so I think if we move forward as a district on understanding our energy usages, I do believe the district office should be part of that. So, as a next step, I mean, it would be, if we further any or advance any discussions with the builder, I know they're not gonna come up with an energy plan for us, but it'd be good to understand what opportunities there and
You're saying to make the district office solar ready, kind of?
well, solar ready is one thing. The other is to understand what our energy use is going to be, and we can probably extrapolate that just based on what was our energy use prior. We know that much, but we also know what equipment we're purchasing as a district that's going into driving that building, from the lighting down to whatever equipment we're putting, plug loads. We know how many plugs we need. I mean, so they can get a rough order of electrical usage and gas usage, and then we can see, well, we're gonna pay PG&E X. What does it look like? How many panels is it, and does the roof support it? They're getting pretty lightweight, so I would just stress that building's getting built. It'd be good to make sure we at least ask the right questions. And whether that's Ed or the superintendent asking those questions, whether we need to be involved in the gathering of that data or anything, I put it out there that we're at a good spot in time and schedule to initiate that.
Has there been any analysis about what that energy?
It's on the mechanical sheets, though, they do a load calc on
Okay, so you're proposing,
I'm just saying that as part of the discussion, if there's any kind of action that comes in the future or is required of the board to direct, I mean, this in my mind is the kind of thing that it's inherent in facility operations and maintenance and kind of the guiding principles of identifying places in which, to save money. I would be totally fine with the district pursuing this without the board's direction, because it's one of these things that it's smart to do now, so. Whether it needs to be an action item, I don't know.
Right.
I just thought we'd
okay,
talk
well,
about it.
certainly the,
I thought when we had town management here, we had some form of this discussion and talked about the opportunity at weekly construction meetings that Ed was attending to kind of continue this discussion. I don't have a specific recollection of it, but
Yeah, there was,
Yeah, I remember that.
Something.
sounds about right.
So-
But we were talking about solar specifically, and that we might want to put solar on the roof. I don't know if there was a conclusion there, but I think we should see if that, we can continue that. I mean, the buildings, as you said, the building's already being built, so I don't know if it's too late for all this. But
No, I think-
But another
mean,
topic
use-
here is lighting.
the
You know,
consultant that was here could easily extrapolate those plans into a usage, I'm sure.
Yeah,
But
but
I'm
he
also
can
pretty sure the
analyze the
designers need
usage.
to do that,
Yeah,
that have already.
that's true, Tyson. He can analyze the usage and he can tell us that will take X amount of energy. But since they're building it, if they're like putting in less efficient lighting before they put it in, we could say, hey, let's put in, I know that's probably a change order and all that stuff, but somebody should look at that and say, okay, is the lighting we're putting in, is that efficient? Or do we want to change anything before they finish the building? That seems like what we need to be doing, in addition to saying, please make the roof solar ready.
Well,
I mean, that's directly related to this energy thing. I thought that was kind of what you were saying.
Well, Title 24
Yeah.
is more, on new construction, it's gonna be more stringent than the lights we have in our schools right now.
Yeah, oh, I know.
So whether we wanna go above and beyond that is a whole nother discussion. But
I think Matt's point was a good one, that these things are already being done and really are.
Well, hopefully, maybe Ed should respond to this. I mean, he's the one who goes to these meetings with Pulte. Has that been discussed, Ed, the energy efficiency of lights, and where are we with that?
Yeah, the lighting is all TA electronic ballast, high efficiency. Solar, we never came to a conclusion on, so I never pushed it there.
Okay, so can we, at this point, direct that we'd like the roof to be able to have solar on it?
Well, why don't we come back after we have our next discussion item?
At this meeting, later in this meeting? Well, sure, but this is the district office. I don't think we're gonna be talking about the district office later in the meeting.
Well, but we're gonna talk about the facilities task force report and presumably to continue this conversation. I think, like I said, my takeaway from this discussion is we've got these energy efficiency items that we can, move forward with at the
we've
next
got another
meeting.
discussion item that we can talk about further, is what I'm hearing.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking the district office is sort of a separate thing because it's a project being built now.
It's a facility,
Right, but it's all part of our facilities and our discussion coming up.
Okay, well, we can wait.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Do you need more direction? Okay, so that concludes our discussion on the energy audit report. We'll now move to the facilities task force report.
Ed, if you want to, Kathy has some copies for the audience as well. Oh, you're right. You want one? I don't know who had them. Purposefully, I didn't say that. It was printed on both sides. I'll put it that way.
Mine's only
So it's all true.
That's fine.
So while they're passing out, there are some folks from the task force here, aside from those that are comprised of either staff or board members. So I wanted to extend a thank you to those who are here and those who are not here for all the time and effort. It was a good, solid amount of work, for sure. And notwithstanding a lot of discussion and a lot of opportunity for input. For those that don't know, we met at every site. We also met here at least 3 times, and including tonight, it would be more. And the goal was a fast one, and I think when we were looking at the calendar early on, Matt and I both just said, well, we gotta do it. So again, appreciate all the hard work and time, as I understand what it takes. So I'd welcome a public comment as well, those in the audience that participated, if they feel the need to share, that by all means, I welcome that. So I'm going to run through this for those who are reviewing it. In essence, what the task force was charged with doing is coming up with a presentation to the board and really a recommendation and priority of what the community and stakeholders, including facilities, staff, teachers, students, parents, community members. I mean, really just gathering as much information as possible in a short amount of time and hashing through it and putting this piece of paper together. So the principles that we landed on as a group: create and maintain a safe environment that is comfortable and conducive to learning. And I'd say that one thing, these are not necessarily in the order of priority or when they were assumed. These were put together in the throes of an evening that went into, we had to vote to extend it to get them all. So understand that while the principles are probably all somewhat equal in my mind, think of students first. You could put that first. I think that was a resounding thing that we heard across the board and everyone agreed upon. The quality of facilities should be equitable across all sites. That has a pretty broad-reaching definition as well, so that's why it landed in terms of a principle. Our assumptions that we made: class size reduction is a district and community priority. And the reason that's in here is because there's inherent things that if the district wanted to exercise and really put more students in any given class, there are certain ways in which that would financially benefit and drive facility decisions in a different way than keeping our class size reduction as a priority. So that was a notable assumption. The other was safety projects that have been identified are underway and not part of the 13.2, so that was a key financial and decision-making that the board had put forth prior to this formation. Another: old and aging portables need to be replaced, but the money available does not allow us to replace them now. So this note was, in essence, brought up that the group recognized that the portables are there. They recognize that they're not the most efficient nor desirable type of situation for the students or the staff, but that the current 13.2 million just wouldn't cover what we would need to do as a district. So they wanted to make sure that that wasn't just left off entirely, but was one of the assumptions that went into the recommendations. The other: all paging systems, Wi-Fi, intercom, server virtualization, and closed circuit projects are in progress or completed. Those come from the master plan update, and wanted to make sure that everybody understood that those were factored in terms of our baseline assumptions. So I'll start with I'll jump down to all because I think that it's going to weigh in. The mindset at the very bottom of the page: make data research-driven decisions in terms of execution. I'd say that recommendation, I mean, the board already knows that that's a priority, hence the report that we just had prior to this, and some of the reports that went into creating this task force. So I wanted to stress that before we jumped into the recommendations. Temperature and indoor climate control for facilities, classrooms, libraries, NPR, and that's not supposed to be just classrooms, libraries, NPR, those are examples thereof, as needed. To stop there, the reason that wasn't, that isn't framed in terms of any particular system or type of control. It's basically a recommendation that temperature is an issue and climate control in the indoor environment is an issue that needs to be addressed, and that's the recommendation. Refurbished bathrooms is needed. That one, the task force heard resoundingly that there are several really aging facilities. And there is a bit of, certain sites have better facilities than others. And there can be some serious improvement for the quality of life for students as well as some staff, I believe. All other projects on the facilities, Appendix E, with the addition of some facility projects recently presented or identified by our director, Ed, and the site administration. Those are recommended for pursuit because of the nature of, a lot of them have really made this list through the facilities department not being able to spend ongoing dollars budget in the last 5 years or so that we've had a challenge as a district with funding. The following items are not priority based on stakeholder input. So this one is a flag basically to say, caution before the board proceeds. Security, perimeter fencing, and gates. While there were specific stakeholders that are interested in that item, as well as the district, we heard pretty much consistently from community input and several others that was really a non-starter for people, really from a community standpoint. The schools are more of a location where people go and want to feel that it's part of the neighborhood. And then portables being removed. So one thing to build off of that is before they're removed, there would have to be a true plan in place. They don't want to see the spaces reduced at sites for common usage, whether it's art, music, science, after-school programs, staff development, whatever we're using the portables for, before they get removed. The resounding request was that there has to be something in place so that you're able to do what we're doing in those portables before we remove them. Establish a maintenance fund reserve, assuming deferred maintenance items are addressed prior to establishing this reserve, or the reserve. So a few different sites express that because of our deferred maintenance issue that we've had with funding, that if we establish said fund with some of this, a portion thereof of the money, that we make sure that all of the maintenance items are taken care of first, so that we don't have this ongoing budget issue that we've had as a district. But it was important enough to note that establishment of some portion of the money for ongoing maintenance was a consideration. Allocate a portion of the dollars to each district site for discretionary use as identified by the individual school site council and approved by the district. These expenditures will be within the restrictions established by the facilities fund. So that meaning the monies earmarked in these 3 bullets below cannot be used for anything outside of facility. And as Ed has defined it through the course of the task force meetings, it's bolted down or otherwise part of the structure itself or the grounds. So the recommendation was that, and this was honestly one that it started really early in the conversation with the district, or with the task force, as we went to different district sites. So this continued to come up and kind of build, and these dollar amounts were not without debate, both up and down. So. But all 4 elementary school sites shall receive $100,000 in this for that school site council, and the middle school OIS would receive basically 2 times, and the idea behind that is that there's more students and really a huge percentage, if not nearly all students, right, that make it through the elementaries go to OIS. So that was the priority there. And then Wagner Ranch Nature Area is eligible to receive a matching grant, matching from the district of up to 1/3 of the amount received by the elementary. So that's roughly $33,333. But the key there is that my understanding is the community would need to put forthcoming some funds that then the district would match out of this fund. Dollar for dollar up to 1/3. The other item, transparency to the public and how the funds are spent and appropriated. I think this was a resounding thing we heard from the community. Just goes to whether it's communication or just categorically getting an understanding out there to the entire community and staff and students and everyone else that this is where the money's being spent and these are the projects that are being put in place so that everybody sees the true benefit of this amount of money. And because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Further investigation should be performed to seek out alternative methods of funding for solar project at OIS. So solar was discussed, and there are several sites that were interested, and other sites that it wasn't really a conversation, but OIS was by far an outlier in terms of the educational component, and then also the opportunity So educational of our students there, and then also the opportunity in terms of power generation. So I think that was a cornerstone. And then improve the grounds to facilitate a comfortable student environment and outdoor learning opportunities. So this had to do with whether we needed, say, some sites needed shade for kids to play in and get out of the sun during the heat, or for that matter, rain cover, whether it's drop off or someone out on the campus. Or it's something as simple as more trees that do the shade, improve the playground facilities, and then it was stressed too that whether indoor or outdoor lunch eating, and then we heard staff say that areas in terms of outdoor education opportunities take kids out of the classroom on campus or nearby the campus to just use the grounds accordingly. So that's what we were able to come up with on a very short whip. We didn't do the board's business to parcel out the money or truly prioritize these things, but I think, there was a lot of data. Matt, if you have anything to add right now or on the process for the board?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, again, I know Wendy and Paul are here, and Bruce is here, so I just want to acknowledge the hard work of you three, and also acknowledge the work of Tyson chairing the committee. Really did a great job of guiding us, and I think Tyson's experience in construction really benefited the committee in the process. So I think we did really, really good work. And what was surprising to me was that we really heard common themes loud and clear. I think 80% of what you see here was just, it was just consistent from the first meeting at Sleepy Hollow all the way through. We just heard consistent, we heard bathrooms, and we heard we want more comfortable climates I'm avoiding the word air conditioning, but we heard air conditioning. But we also at the same time acknowledge that there are wings of certain school sites where you don't need air conditioning. Maybe you need nothing, maybe you just need fans in the rooms, ceiling fans. So that's one of the reasons I think we're kind of staying away from air conditioning is, one of the things we talked about was really empowering staff or whoever does this work to go out and make individual decisions, because we were looking at Appendix E and it said, replace 68 doors at Delray. Well, the fact of the matter is maybe only 62 doors need replacing, maybe 51 doors need replacing. So one of the things we talked loud and clear about was, we're not rubber stamping, hey, we're just gonna, because we can tell how fast this money's going. So what we talked about was we really want to make sure that we make individual decisions. Tyson said it well, make data research-driven decisions in terms of execution. If a door doesn't need replacing, let's not replace it just because we're replacing all the doors. And then we heard loud and clear about bathrooms. From the first meeting at Sleepy Hollow, we heard there are kids in the district that will not use bathroom facilities at their schools because they are so gross and smelly and yucky and nasty. And that's not right. And we really have an opportunity to rectify that. And just personally, I'm looking forward to the opportunity to get that stuff cleaned up. And it was also noted that was through no fault of maintenance staff. These facilities are clean, but they are old, and they have kids using them, and they're dingy. And certainly, the most obvious for me is to see some of the stalls in the bathrooms are just rusted out, and it's hard to keep those clean. We also have a couple kids' bathrooms that have cement floors that have just been accumulating, what bathrooms accumulate for a long time. So we heard loud and clear about air conditioning, we heard loud and clear about bathrooms. And then it was real clear that we heard loud and clear that we want to spend the money that touches students. It's funny, it's kind of similar, Joe, to when we went through all the budget cuts. Let's keep the cuts as far away from the students. Well, now that we have an opportunity to spend some money, we heard loud and clear, let's keep the money as close as possible to the students. So, and then the only other thing I wanted to add, just to get a tiny bit more specific, was it's not noted here, but what you see here is, let's pay attention to Appendix E, the priority projects in Appendix E of the project list of the updated master facilities plan. And there's some really good stuff there, but we heard loud and clear from OIS that they want more tables and chairs for lunchtime. Delray needs shade structures, Delray needs hydration. They only have one drinking fountain out on their playground. That's not getting the job done. Delray is in need of paint for their exteriors. Delray has, some of the roofs of their breezeways are rotten. And we've just been deferring and deferring and deferring, and it's time to get those fixed. One of the things we talked about was Delray needs paint. Obviously, we would wait until we got all that dry rot fixed. You wouldn't want to paint something that was rotten. Glorietta's got an issue with an upper playground play structure with curb and a high curb and sand. It gets spread out all over the school site. Janice at Wagner talked specifically about it would be great to have some auto closing and auto locking gates near play areas where some of the special ed kids use it because they're kind of means for running. Wagner wants to do some interior paint. So things were identified. Sleepy Hollow talked about enlarging their NPR so they can get their whole school community into one room for assemblies. And one thought of all those things I just mentioned was that this would be the opportunity for those discretionary funds. That while we want all sites to have comfortable climates for kids, whether that be through air conditioning, whether it be for rehabbing bathrooms, that there are also individual needs at all the individual schools. And I think that's kind of where this allocating discretionary funds to each site came from. There was significant discussion about where those dollars would land. You know, how do you come up with $100,000 per site, $200,000 for OIS, and there was significant discussion at the committee level, and those numbers vary greatly at different points in the discussion. But I think that I personally thought they should land a little bit lower, but when you look at the discretionary needs of different sites, I don't think $100,000, if used appropriately, is excessive. Although there might be opportunities to bring that number down. These are the numbers that the committee came up with. That's it.
So I think one other thing I'd like to add is that I truly appreciate the board putting this in play and getting out to the community, because even the nights that were sparsely attended, the feedback I got from those that did attend, was the process was extremely important to go through, and to put it out there and basically put us out there as the district to the community was a critical effort, not just to gather the data, but to also just express to the community where we were coming from. So thank you.
Well, and huge, it's incredible the amount of work that both of you did and the members of the task force, so we're all really appreciative of the amount of time that was put in and effort.
It's important to note that Ed, Lorene, and Joe were at every meeting.
And everyone. You guys
And
have a
principals.
lot of meetings. Okay, so, does anyone want to start us off? Other than the task force members?
Oh, they started us off already. We're up and going. A couple, so
It's a lot of info.
I was gonna say, thank you so much for all the work and for getting it onto one page that's digestible and can give a lot of direction to our district as we go forward. I think that is super. And I just wanted to echo the piece. I was glad to see the transparency piece at the bottom, public. I mean, I viewed that as perhaps the most important thing, the process of gathering information and letting school sites and everyone else involved there to have an opportunity to say what they think is important to them and the kids there. I think it's particularly important, and I don't think it was, well, I know it wasn't tasked to this task force, but I think we're all aware that the $13.2 million is a good starting point, and we're gonna spend it all, and at some point, there may be other projects we wanna do. And so having a transparent process, having a accounting for what we've done with our Pulte money, I think is very important going forward. A couple of questions again. I didn't get to think on this too much because I was just seeing it the first time, but for Tyson or Matt, as far as the portables go, so as I understand portables, we rent portables and we pay for them, and that obviously costs us money, but then to take them out, we still have to put kids someplace, then we have to rebuild a new structure. Is that kind of the process you're thinking about, that the rebuilding of a permanent structure is what's gonna be prohibitively costly at this point? Am I reading that right, or what?
I think that's part of it. To clarify, we do own some portables as well, and they're not in great shape either. The ones we lease, I think, are actually in pretty darn good shape for a portable building.
Okay.
But it's a combination of whether, phasing out or getting rid of the portables that we own, or phasing out leasing for permanent structure or replacement facility. Is kind of the concept there that, having, you could easily, one thing that was discussed is you could probably spend this 13.2 replacing all the portables, and then you wouldn't have any of these other things done.
Right.
So it was one of those things that the group recognized the issue is there, and instead of just ignoring it, wanted to make a base assumption and move off to the other more pressing pieces.
A lot of the ones that we own are pretty, they're really old. Some of them are like 50-something years old. A bunch of them are 20-something years old. And then some newer ones, and those, I think, most of the newer ones are leased. So we could replace old portables with new portables. I mean, was that discussed at all, or?
I don't know that it was really reviewed in terms of getting rid of our old ones to just tack on more lease. I think that, I
Or
don't
to
think we
purchase
went there.
a new, I don't know what the purchase price on.
I think, again, we focused on the fact that by the time you start replacing existing facilities, right, whether it was, primarily the portables were really outlined in the master docs, right, in terms of an opportunity. And so that came up as a topic, but one of the things to stress about this point is because every space is being utilized by the sites, and I tried to stress this while I was saying, is that if the community basically wants that space utilized, so if there was one that was going to be removed, you really have to have the district online with an action plan to remove it that summer so that it was seamless, so that they didn't see it go away, they were in it till the last day, and then they turned the key on the first day of school and walked into whatever's replacing. So that it's not we're gonna cram a bunch of kids into space, or we're not gonna have art this year, or we're gonna not have a library, or we're gonna, it's keep the approach diligent for the kids to have their experience that they're having now.
Was there a stronger discussion about portable replacement, whatever that may look like, at the sites that have the older portables? Because it seems like Delray and Orinda are the ones that sort of have that. So I don't know if that was, when you were out at the sites, was that more of an issue of those?
I think there were some outlining issues with some of the truly really old or just not worth pouring more they were, so it'd be, you know, really a site-specific exercise there, and a priority of what is that space being used for? I mean, if it's not being used because of its situation, then it's obviously in need of replacement, and I don't think there would be a problem there, but it was more, because that's more of an entry point into the discussion, as opposed to the global approach to really replace portables with new facilities.
And do we know how much we spend a month or going on leasing the portables?
And maybe at the same time, they could comment on which ones are the really old ones, how many of them, I know it's in the master facilities plan, but I was looking for that myself. How many were recommended to be retired or whatever the wording was? It was identified a certain number that were really old.
So we paid, in one of the warrants, we paid $12,000 to Mobile Modular. I don't know if all of that is,
I was trying to look at that, but some of that one was like an annual, some were monthly, so it's
Yeah.
a little hard to,
but that's a, I mean,
yeah.
it's, yeah, it's 5 figures a month at least. We could probably put it that way.
We spend over $100,000 on portables a year.
On leasing them, and that, it says here we lease 13 portables, does that sound right?
Yeah, I think that's great.
That was in, it says in the master
John.
facility plan. So over 100,000 a year. Okay. And what does it cost to buy a new portable? Approximately.
It depends, you can do what they call a used portable, which is one that's been used and in very good shape. And at certain times of the year, they send out flyers, and I've seen them as
Bring it
low as
far.
45,000 and as high as 60-something thousand, so.
Mhm.
A couple other, I was gonna say, a couple other, so I liked, I didn't expect, but I really liked the maintenance reserve fund, idea, because that's not gonna be something that, looks like it's gonna be coming to us from the state on a per annum basis, and yet, you know, facilities get older, and if you don't maintain them, they get bad fast. So I think that's a great point in there. And then, one last question, for anyone, but, so when you talk about the solar projects at OIS, I mean, that was, again, that was a highlight at OIS, or maybe more than the other sites. Not that I'm suggesting we do this, but is it possible to do the economics work to do solar at one site and not all the sites, since we pay our bill to PG&E globally? Can you do just one site? Does anyone know?
Good question.
I think what I took away was that you want to offset that site's meter usage. But I think the reason this is on this particular list is because of any place, well, one, we were looking at 13.2 million. Yeah, just
Absolutely,
let's keep it there.
yeah.
And there were a lot of things that can be, if you look at this list, it probably gets real close to that and not a lot more. So that, you know, keep that in mind. But that being said, if there was one place that made sense to try it and see what's going on and get an educational benefit and also get some synergies with whether it was a shade area or a cool down area or maybe some additional outside shelter for where they're eating, or I mean, you name the different applications, I think that site probably had the best usage allocation for a start or a pilot or any kind of entry point.
No, and I totally agree. I mean, OIS seems like it'd be a great, or the number one spot. I just didn't know if feasibly, if you just build solar at one site, if it just offsets the meter at that site, or if it gets diluted by your whole PG&E bill of everything. Can you do it one site?
Yeah, I think you can build it at one site, but that, to me, that's also an issue of the electric bill, yes, it would offset electricity at that site, but in reality, aren't we paying the bill, one bill for the district, or do we pay separately from each school site, whatever the bill? Do we get bills separately per school site, or is it one bill that comes to OUSD for our utilities? I'm just curious how that
We get
works.
multiple.
Yeah, our warrants
You
are
get
split up,
multiple
yeah.
ones, okay, I haven't gone looking for that. So, but it, I mean, it would be a savings, but it's really a savings to the district. It's not, and it's not helping that school, right? It's a savings to the district because we're paying the utility bill.
Well, I think that, the discussions, I guess, were about the fact that it makes sense to leverage the facility funds to benefit the students, and whether that means ongoing revenue sources such as general fund not being spent on items, or it means having a drinking fountain, or it means having a restroom that they want to use. I think it was all of those things that, because the general fund money is what we spend for our utility bills, and that can be spent in a lot better ways that impact the students. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was the gist.
Yeah, so related to that, so how much savings, I don't remember if it's in his report, but how much savings would it save the electric bill just, if we just did it at OAS, did solar? That must be in here, right?
Might be in
Does
the
anyone
new
remember? Yeah. I mean, personally, I think we should consider doing more, but, since that's what you have on your list, I was just thinking, so how much
This is,
savings
yeah,
is
again, this
that?
is a recommendation from the task force, so
Right.
we can talk as a board about all kinds of good things too, but
All right, so if we stick to the recommendation from the task force, were you guys done, Chris?
Yes, thank you.
I was just trying to look at page 138, just so you kind of breaks it down a little bit, but
In the,
By school
which
site.
page, one
in our
thirty?
packet.
138 in our packet, where we talk, table 8 talks about private solar production with efficiency projects with OAS at 660. You see table 8 and table 9. But then I start wondering.
So that's the total cost of doing the solar, right? With
I mean,
the
there might be a
solar
different-
and efficiency, but it doesn't tell you how much you're gonna save in your energy bill in that particular chart. Maybe it's in some other chart here, I forget, but I'm not sure if that's totally.
I know, but isn't that the next?
Yeah, the next table, the
Next table,
25-year
table
revenue.
9.
Okay, the next table says total project cost, then total revenue. Total revenue is how much you're, is that how much you're saving?
That's how much you're generating, I think.
No, I think look
Electricity?
at the 25-year net benefit.
Wait, with efficiency, so that's with efficiency. Well, the 25-year is, no, this is confusing. That's after 25-year, your net benefit. So are you saying?
So you generate
it says
1.8
1
million.
1.8 million total
And
revenue.
you spent 727, so you net in 25 years $1 million,
Right.
based on that table.
But if you're just doing one site, your numbers might be different anyway.
Yeah, the math, I'm sure changes a little, but
Mhm. All right, well, back to the task force list. So, Chris, would you?
Yeah, I have my, thank you.
So I have, so thank you to the task force for all your work. Thank you for heading it up, Tyson. I think it's it's great what you came up with. I do have a couple of questions and a couple of things that I don't know are included. So questions, first question is where it says establish a maintenance reserve fund, assuming deferred maintenance items are addressed prior to establishing the reserve. It seems like, do we have, I'm kind of wanted to hear from Lorraine, what do we do now for maintenance? Do we take it out, do we have a maintenance reserve fund, do we take, I know I asked Joe some questions about this, but I forget what I heard on Friday. I know we basically don't really have a pot of money for maintenance, but how, if we were to carry out this bullet, what would that look like? That's another way to put it. In your eyes, Lorraine. Maybe I'm putting you on the spot. Joe, what do you think?
We talked about deferred maintenance.
Uh-huh.
So you may want to ask, go ahead and review the maintenance budget allocations that we help shed light on.
So this year we have budgeted 2.6 million in maintenance, in our entire maintenance budget. That includes staff, utility contracts, that's everything, that's utilities.
Trucks, tools.
Yes, that's the entire budget. So of that budget, 1.5 of that is staff salaries. So the balance of the, what is it, 1.1 would be allocated towards repairs and equipment. That does, like I said, include all the utilities, so it includes the sewer service, water, waste, electricity, and gas.
Okay. So part of that is staff, this is like general fund money, or
That's all general fund.
do we get any specific maintenance or capital money from the state that's identified that way?
No, we no longer receive deferred maintenance fund money. That was part of the tier 3 flexibility money that went away about 5 years ago.
Uh-huh. Okay, thank you. And then about the portables, you know, as a school board, we have to be thinking in terms of, you know, as our facilitator the other night reminded us, fiduciary responsibilities. You know, these portables, as I mentioned before, I was on the facility committee back, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever. And I remember all the portables on the list then, and we were being told then that we need to look at that, and they're getting old, and why are we leasing them and all that. And now we still have them here, and I understand why you didn't want to identify them, because for various reasons, but on the other hand, the task force is getting, your charge was more to get the input from the community. The community is never going to see replacing portables as a big priority, because it's not, you know, that exciting. It's just, it's a huge cost and whatever. And it's not that significant to an individual child in the classroom or to any, you know, to your goal of creating and maintaining a safe environment. Well, that's what it does to us, thinking of students first. But, you know, the portables are the old ones. I couldn't find the page, but I know it's in here that recommended replacing old ones. I don't think we can just kind of ignore that and say, well, we don't have enough money. I mean, this is also, this task force was also created as a way to figure out where to go next with the master facility plan. But that's a topic that I think we really should continue to look at and not dismiss. So I would like to have more conversation on that. And then there's a couple of other things I wanted to mention. You kind of mentioned, someone mentioned somewhere along the lines the Glorietta situation of the play structure with the sand in it and whatever. That play structure, the primary grade play structure I mentioned before, I don't believe it's up to code. I know it's not up to code because there's that cement curb that doesn't allow enough fall space, according to the playground safety codes. I was on the playground committee when we put in the kindergarten playground and the other playground, which is for the older kids, the 4th and 5th graders. And we didn't have, the Parents Club did that, there wasn't enough money to do the other one, but I still think it needs to be considered of, you know, the whole thing, not just replacing the sand, but the whole thing. Is that a safety hazard or what? Because that curb is definitely a safety hazard, and there may be other things there that need to be considered. And that's something that we as a board, I mean, if there's any kind of safety problems, that's gonna come back to us. It's not.
Is that item in the appendix on the Gloria's stuff, or is it just?
No, it was not in the appendix. I brought up that when in June, when this
The
master
appendix
facility
is
plan.
just the sound? I thought
Yeah, all the appendix mentions is sand.
Yeah, it mentions the sand. So you could replace the sand and you still have the same play structure. And I'm saying the curb is not, I don't believe the curb is up to code, and I don't believe the play structure is up to code. And I think it's, you know, we're not including that topic, and that's a safety hazard that is our concern as a board, more so than anyone else.
Sarah, can I just have
Yeah.
Ed comment on that?
We have curbs on all the playground structures with the exception of Ryan Ranch. That one's built at ground level, the curb. The one thing I remember about the Glorietta playground was the tire swing. I think that was the only one in question too close to the curb, and I believe we moved it, but I'll double check those dimensions.
I believe you removed the tires.
Moved it in
Oh,
from the
you moved
curb.
it in? Moved
But I'll double
pipe.
check, I have a note here to check it.
Okay, well, what I remember also is that turning bar, you know, the turning bar, that was too close to the curb.
I think, if I can interrupt for a second, I think Ed can respond to the plan, your plan to remove the sand and address the curb. You know, we can't take the curb all the way out, because when that was originally put in years and years ago, they just set everything on top of the blacktop. So if you take the curb out, everything's just gonna spill out across the blacktop. What we can do is what we did at Del Rey, we cut a huge cut in the curb, made an ADA accessible ramp into the box, and we got rid of the sand and put in engineered wood chips.
So is that what the item that's in the appendix? Did you do all that?
In there, it just says the sand, get rid of the sand. But I think it's smart to cut the curb to ADA access it.
Yeah, technically you're supposed to have that. Yeah, it just needs, I just think it needs more attention, let's just put it that way. But, I mean, those are, you know, safety concerns, those are just as important as any of the other safety concerns that there are, so. You know, and another thing that, I don't know if you purposely didn't include it, but even though we already approved technology projects in June, as part of the first time we looked at the master facility plan, you know, with smarter balance coming up and everything, I know we have some money from the state, but there could be technology infrastructure things that maybe we haven't anticipated, or I just think we should keep our radar out for that, because there may be further technology infrastructure that we want to be included. I'm looking at this more as it's important that we consider all the needs and prioritize the needs, and then we're gonna have to go through and look at dollars. And so that's why I'm saying these things. So I think technology infrastructure, she needs to be continued to look at, that Glorietta play structure, and then, you know, I know it's been brought up that there was a concern about the size of the kindergarten playgrounds at Wagner Ranch, and that is actually a safety issue, the number of kids. We've got TK over there now too, so if you had a certain size kindergarten area for kindergartners, and then you add TK up there in the same area, you know, you may need more space there, and that's a safety issue, because if you get too many kids in a small space, they're gonna have more accidents. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is, you know, I appreciate the fact that the Wagner Ranch Nature Area is listed here along with the school sites and for matching funds. But I think aside from just saying, okay, let's give them matching funds, I think that bathroom issue needs, you know, addressing in a different way. Because I know they brought up, we all got the letter saying that that was one of the projects they wanted to look at. Well, that's our property, is district property, the nature area. Our kids go there for programs, and we need to make sure there are bathroom facilities that are, you know, up to the whatever level that we as a board feel like is appropriate for that place. And so I think that's something where the district should stay involved and make sure that we have bathroom facilities for the kids going to the nature area that are what we want. I'm not saying what it has to be, but that's different than just saying, well, we'll give you some more money to do, you know, a nicer kitchen or whatever, you know, the other projects. That seems different to me in a different category. And I know those projects, I don't mean to diminish the projects, the kitchen, the roof, those are important. But I think the bathrooms are something where the district should continue to work that out. And the fact that I guess there are bathrooms in the gym, you know, I don't know what the situation is, but maybe Ed does, in terms of whether they now can use the bathrooms in the gym without any problem, or the school site, or what. I don't know all the issues, but I think that's an important topic that needs to get continued to hashed out. And that's all my specific comments. I think that this is great, but I also think that the master facility plan that we were presented with, we need to kind of loop back to that and say, how does this fit in the context of the master facility plan, and are there other things in the master facility plan that we should continue to consider? So I'm not sure where we were going to go next with this. Tyson, I'll throw it back to you. Or Julie. Julie, I guess, hasn't made comments.
Yeah, I have some questions. So on the third recommendation, where it says all other facilities projects, with the addition of the facilities projects recently presented and or identified by the Director of Facilities and Site Administration, is there a list, or is there something that we haven't seen that you guys?
Yeah, Ed and staff have a list that you can forward to the board beyond the appendix.
So these are items that are not in the appendix at all?
Right. They're basically additions between when the facilities study was done in terms of producing the appendix and today, or a week ago, or whenever you want to say. And based on, obviously, feedback from Steve and others that are on the ground.
So is this additional document something that came out of the task force discussions?
It was during the discussions that basically Ed and team put together items that were not included in the appendix,
Okay.
that were felt to be important. And it, honestly, at 10:20 at night, we didn't have that list and didn't want to make this 2 pages for you, Chris. So we, but that list is tangible and can be provided. It was pretty basic. I mean, I think there were like 7 or 8 items, if my memory serves me, maybe less. So it wasn't
Total.
Yeah, it wasn't it was mainly just things that had come up since the total school solutions document was generated.
Important for us to see. And then did you guys talk about, because my understanding is that, and maybe, this money originally was meant to be a reserve that we were going to use the interest. Of course, there's not much interest anymore right now, but my understanding is that this money, and Joe, maybe you can tell us, you know, what the original thought was for the money, because I'm wondering if you guys talked about, like, well, how much you would want to set aside as a reserve. Or, I mean, I think actually Sarah's point about the technology infrastructure would be a good example, because that's something that is probably sort of constantly in need of upgrading over time. So I don't know if,
That's why that was actually one of the key assumptions, was that based on the board direction, in August, I believe, when we actualized a lot of the Wi-Fi and the CCTV and a lot of that, just initial infrastructure, that was part of the equation. As far as the dollar amount though, on the establishing of what it was, I think the group really stressed the fact that since there's been, I mean, what I heard from Lorraine was that there's $1 million, and then that pays a lot of bills and probably a lot of leases and and so we shrink it down to getting maybe a nice big project or 8 little ones done a year, and the deferred maintenance for 5 years that we haven't been really attacking. The group thought it was very important to make sure that those things are fixed in a durable manner and put the money to take those off the list, and then whatever's left over. It wasn't really a dollar amount, Matt, that I mean, there were different community members that voiced how much it should be or put this or that, but at the end they usually deferred to just do something. Because it's hard to know what's left. I mean, I think personally the reason I would say it's on here in my mind is to just make sure the board's well aware of the priority to budget that way moving forward. Even if there's nothing available, know that it's been a problem.
Maybe Tyson, now would be a good time to talk about the placeholder structure discussion. As far as the dollars that were on Appendix E and kind of the thought process that the committee used around it.
Oh, sure. So in broad strokes, I mean, the Total School Solutions Appendix was really just a waypoint or, rough order of magnitude. I mean, by no means did everyone assume that, we're going to get it all done for whatever that line item said. It was recognized that there were typos. It was recognized that there were obviously true placeholders put in across all sites, like whether it's air conditioning or insulation or whatever it may be. Probably in one site you couldn't get it done for that, or maybe the other one you could. It would really be site dependent. So from a dollars and cents standpoint, there were certain items that the price tag wasn't really factored in as much as it was a priority to accomplish. And by that I mean, say, refurbished bathrooms as needed. That's wasn't inherently in any of these documents, right? Temperature and indoor climate control, that was really, my understanding of that is the board needs to help the district figure out how to get there. And because to what Matt said earlier, there are classrooms that are fine, and then there are classrooms that are just not fine. So coming up with that and getting that information, and what I heard earlier, it sounds like that may be an opportunity for part of this Prop 39 planning type of, whether that's a study that gets done and gets infused to get that data and make it rich and real in terms of what's going on our sites. But by no means, as a placeholder, it was let's take these things and make sure we know that they're rough orders of magnitude, and hopefully we can do better, but there's a process. And then the other thing that's not in here was timeline. It kind of goes to the transparency piece in my mind as opposed to anything, and to make research data-driven decisions. But coming up with that timeline and communicating what's going to be done so people know, is this the summer? Is this just going to happen while we're on break? Is it going to happen 5 years from now? I mean, being true to the word on sharing when things are going to happen for for the sites and what they are. Wasn't
And I'm
important.
assuming a lot of the things are things that we put out to bid and have a lot of,
That circle back to us, yeah. Was there something else, Matt, on that too?
so going back to that appendix, when you're, talking about, you know, because we have this energy audit that didn't really say insulate and double pane and all that, so those items were in the appendix. So is the task force recommendation that it's sort of like appendix E without those items, or
No, I
Is
think
that
if
part
we,
of
yeah, if we
the
wanna look at,
temperature?
we
and
could look at
climate
appendix E,
control?
I mean, I think certain window-driven decisions were a safety, more first and foremost, we comment on that, right? Because there are certain windows that are identified as really more of a hazard, and to Mr. C's earlier point, you know, some of those legal ones, they're not only not efficient, but there's security issues, or you name it, so there's, I think what the task force did was really say, of all these items, other facilities projects, so if you look at the, let's see if I can grab it. If you look.
So I think
Yeah,
each
why not?
of those is like 250,000 per site for windows, 250,000 for insulation.
So if you looked at other projects, you'd have concrete sidewalks, asphalt, you'd have R&Ring roofs, you'd have repairing drainage ditches on hillsides, retaining walls. I mean, really looking at all the facility-driven items that are on here. So they would, some of them would include things like insulation or things that are on, say, the recommendations that were on the earlier agenda. I don't know if I look through this, I mean, controls, I don't think controls pop on the other projects list, if I remember right.
I thought controls was kind of embedded with the air conditioning, remember?
It may have been.
I kind of thought.
It was in the discussion at least, it was like, if you do one, I mean, that was definitely one of the big debates, was, do we just move the air around and cool it? And I think that's how we landed on temperature and indoor climate control, like, just, let's get the data to look at each location and figure out what that spot needs, because right through a wall, it may be completely different. So that we're not just blanket air conditioning everywhere, or, no one gets it, and we're gonna put fans everywhere. I mean, it's more about, let's get the solution that works for the kids in wherever they are.
And my thought, Julie, as we work through this process is, as we look at prices, priority project says, double pane windows, priority project says insulate. As we start to get pricing on that stuff, if we see that those prices are not consistent with the direction the board wants to go, me personally, as an individual board member, I'm not heavily in favor of spending a ton of money on insulation. I don't know that air conditioning is going to be on that much. So, maybe 15% of the time, maybe 20% of the time. So I don't know that we get that ROI on insulation at $250,000 a
I
site,
think that's what.
or maybe it comes out at $400,000 a site. So
Well,
without,
one site has it, and the other ones are, you know what, why do it, right? But the newer site might be easier, or the type of construction.
right.
Or certain rooms, I mean, who knows, right? I mean, it's-
Wings.
Well, and I think if you looked at the master facilities plan, the energy efficiencies were like $3 million, and here we have, a report tonight that's telling us it'll cost you $285,000, and that'll give you the best, return, the best cost benefit, and maybe these other items wouldn't.
Yeah, and I truly think that the low-hanging fruit on the energy audit is where, obviously, we're gonna get our biggest bang for our buck, whether it's the 80-20 rule, whether that's 80% of the low-hanging fruit right there, then, certainly. And then we start fine-tuning it from there as we start to work through.
And I think one important thing to state is that we were operating under the assumption as a task force, that in order to go to the air, you have to study what you're doing, try and pursue some avenue of capturing funds elsewhere, right? It wasn't, so if insulating is a piece of the equation that gets us more money, right, as a district from somewhere, it's like, okay, well, spend a little to gain a little, right? And do that analysis, not just go blindly forward one way or the other. So I think that was kind of the inherent thing, was make sure we can leverage it, but the end goal was comfort for the occupants, however we got there.
One parent really stated clearly, at one of the sites, money creates money. You know, let's make sure, Tyson used the word leverage a lot. Let's make sure that the opportunities are out there to leverage these dollars, if it makes sense for us.
And as far as the site sort of discretionary funds that the task force is recommending, how were you determining what projects would be considered, you know,
We did,
projects coming out of that versus projects that would be,
I think it was more about empowering the site to have some funds available to do something that was important to that site, and within reason. I mean, it was one of these, site council and the local field knows what they want to execute on, and maybe it's a quick hit type of project, maybe it's not, but the idea was let's get something rolling for the sites to make a decision, have a process, kind of extend what we just did to make sure that they can effectually change something soon for their site that they want, that may not be one of these fixed drainage or new sewer line or Wi-Fi, right? It's already kind of embedded. It was more something that benefits the community.
it's tricky to think about, you know, what, you know, one site would say, you know, has on the list already, that another site would be, you know, compelled to use these discretionary funds for, and how do you make sure you're having equity and, you know, it's just challenging to think about how to do that properly.
Yeah, and that's a lot of money. When I first read this, it says all 4 elementary school sites shall receive $100,000. I wasn't clear if you meant
That's
in
each.
total or each, yeah, and then I realized you meant each. That is a lot of money.
On the last recommendation, are any of the improve the grounds to facilitate a comfortable student environment, are any of those items already in the appendix or in the new list? Or is this?
Well, I think that was more speaking to the idea of creating an outdoor educational learning and or comfort, and whether it's somebody reading a book in the corner, playing on a playground, or a teacher taking a class out on campus, right? Being able to create more of a park-like setting, I think it was said by one of the parents at one meeting, just having it feel like it's a place where people can just sit and learn and not get either baked by the sun or feel like, you know, it's all concrete around them, or just fostering that
So that's
classroom
some
outside,
items that are not
or
on this and are not on the list.
it may be some of the things, like playground, right, may stretch, shade may stretch into, I mean, there's, some of these things may stretch into the list, but the inherent, you know, some prime examples would be, Gloria had a proposal to do an outdoor educational classroom. OIS teachers expressed having a place to be able to take kids somewhere on campus outside of the class to sit and learn. So those two stand alone as more the focused, and then I think that the task force took it as a whole, because it wasn't just those two one-offs. Every site kind of had a need, whether it's shade-driven or comfort while you're playing. In my mind, the hydration station really at Delray fits into this, in my thinking at least. Just facilitating, leveraging, I'll use that word again, our grounds we have a lot of space. I mean, a lot of schools that don't have what we have here. And getting kids to utilize all that space in the best way possible.
The idea isn't to take those concepts and use those items with the discretionary
Could
funds.
be, I mean,
Could be.
but it was a priority that was identified in terms of recommendations. The discretionary piece is kind of its own animal. I think that it was important to earmark outside of whatever the board decided to do as a whole for the district or any individual site, if there was something there that, while still gets approved, was inherently a site decision. And whether they made it before they knew what was going on or after, I don't know. I mean, it was more empowering them to take part in this.
A lot of food for thought.
You know, one interesting thing to discuss is trees. A lot of solar people consider trees to be the enemy of solar, that tall trees get in the way of sun getting the solar panels. The other interesting thing that we heard loud and clear was we need to dig up, cut concrete and dig up asphalt where tree roots are coming up and creating tripping hazards. And as well, we heard we need to plant trees to create shade. For example, at Wagner, there's blacktop that comes right up to school entrances, and the sun just pounds that blacktop and then just pounds that wall and that door, and there's just no relief. It just comes in that room. And wouldn't it be great, one of the things they talked about at Wagner was, boy, maybe up to a certain point, we cut out asphalt, plant some grass, or put something there so that that asphalt isn't right there, essentially acting as a mirror into the room with heat. And there was talk about in sites like that, it wasn't specifically Wagner, let's plant trees in those, near those classrooms that are so exposed to the sun and just getting pounded. That you could really mitigate significant heat intrusion by planting trees. At the same time, we're hearing we need to spend a lot of money to deal with tree roots, and we're hearing that some trees, you know, potentially a shade structure with solar panels on top over the two eating areas at OAS, the two central outdoor eating areas at OAS. As far as I'm concerned, nobody's talked about it. That would involve cutting down a lot of trees, or certainly chopping off the top halves of a lot of trees, which to me means cutting down trees. So, you know, while we're talking about outdoor learning areas, and Glorietta's got a great rendering of a parent put together this really neat kind of some trees and some shrubs and some rocks, and just a nice place for kids to hang out with a teacher and do some reading or just really enjoy the outside while still learning. You know, trees are really a significant issue. While we want to plant some, while we cut some down and deal with the tree roots on others. And trees are a challenge.
The good news is, though, we may need less air and climate control if we do it right. We may have a little more asphalt budget, but
That's right.
more drainage or on and on.
Board questions?
Once we decide on whether we're gonna put solar and where, then we can decide where we wanna put trees or other shade structure. Trees are great, I'm all for trees, but in some places we may need a shade structure because they can't wait for the tree. We may need both.
Seating for the OAS kids at lunch. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, let's open it up for public comment. Anyone from the public have a comment?
Although I'm a district parent and was on the task force. I really appreciated Tyson and Matt's guidance in the task force. It was, I felt like I got a mini, not so many, seminar in what you, as a school board, you have to do. I came in with the agenda of representing my site, representing parents, and it's a tough hat to wear both sides, and I feel like by the end of it I got a good dose of both. What I want to really add or spend my time yakking about is the portables. You know, after a number of years being out of the elementaries, you might lose touch with that, but what's funny is, you know, and there was the assumption in the room that portables are bad. You know, they're inefficient, they're expensive, they're ugly. I mean, there's nothing really good about a portable from a business sense, and that was an assumption we all made. The flip side of that is that kids are ecstatic when they end up in a 50-year-old portable because it has air conditioning. And that's something I really want to remind the board, because that's the kids. And they, as ugly as it is, I mean, they feel like they won on the days, on back to school day, when they find out they're in a crappy portable. You know, because it's not going to be an oven. And so that's a reality. And then with the enrollment being a little down these last, I guess, this year, yes, there are some open brick and mortar classrooms, and they're vacant. We don't want to be in those. They'd rather be in the portable. So that I think that's why you heard so much about don't take away portables, because they are as bad as they are for the district. They're great for the kids and great for the experience. So that's, and again, I really want to. I mean, it was a great process being involved, and I'm so glad we don't have a meeting on the 7th.
You don't want to go?
Well, you know, yeah. So it was great pounding through it that night, and the other thing I guess I want to assure you is from what I took in of all the sites, I can't see any, if it was to go up to the $100,000 being spent on silly. I don't see an electronic sign in anyone's future. I see it being, hey, those benches weren't going to get painted for 2 more years, maybe they get painted. Maybe the doors that aren't falling off get painted, maybe a mural, maybe, you know, something that's going to be a community building. So I don't think I honestly would worry that much about that. I mean, again, the caveat, board approval. So, thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, thank everybody for the work, and
Can you
thanks
just
for
state
putting.
your name?
Oh, Bill Hudson, with Wagner Ranch Nature Area. I'm glad that the C were included on here. Thank you very much, and thank you for the work. I've got 2 questions. One, if the money that we raised, how restricted would that be? I mean, we came with the 2 projects we thought probably would fit most beneficial to the kids' use, with the probably not a money that might be available. But if we were able to fit more things into this, would that be okay? And then the second thing is, if I could get some insight about the thinking that went into sort of the matching grant aspect of that, it would be helpful.
Thank you. And this is a time for public comment, so I'm
Okay.
going to have somebody,
Okay. Yeah.
right, and obviously that item that you're talking about is sort of like part of our discussion. There's no set,
Okay.
nothing's
However
been
you
taken
want to
action
handle
on
those, yeah.
yet. Thank you. Are there any other comments?
This is
If you could
a great
please state your-
opportunity. My name is Adam. I want to say, first of all, it's a great opportunity to say something not related to solar. I'm very happy to do that. One thing I think is not being, it is being considered, but in a certain way it's not. It's kind of a paradox here. But are just almost sort of sound business decisions about simple, like, return on the investment. I'll give you an example. If my arithmetic holds up, we're renting portables for $100,000 a year. And if we had to buy 3 of them, or 13 of them, it would be about $600,000. I mean, I'm just listening to what Ed and Maureen had said. So if the math holds up, it pays for itself in 6 or 7 years. And to me, it's crazy not to make that sort of decision. Now, let's not worry about air conditioning for a second. Let's just say, all else being equal, it's like you've got an enormous savings account of $13 million, yet you're refusing to pay off your credit card. So you're paying this enormous sort of upfront interest. And it's also a way to free up $100,000 that's coming out of the general budget if I understand this correctly, and could be taken from a very restricted facilities fund. It buys you flexibility, and it's gonna pay for itself in 7 years, and then from there on out, every year, you've got $100,000 to spend on trees, or bathrooms, or doors, or all the things that we don't have enough money for. I mean, I would see that there are certain categories of projects that just pay for themselves. And I think, like, in my mind, those have to come first. And sort of to do otherwise, to not take advantage of that. And the cost of that lost opportunity is just huge. As the portables, okay, more complicated than that. But I just would like to see that calculation taken into account.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, Charles?
Charles Shannon, Million President. It's just brief. We have heard in the past there are some portables that are outdated and in need of replacement. So it also makes sense, along with what Adam's saying, that if that happens, I mean, I know I've been in some portables on a temporary basis, and there were strong odors and such. So I would think that from that standpoint, we want to also look into which ones really need replacement, because it's not a conducive environment for learning as well. And also, some of them are really loud when the heating or air conditioning's on, and it's really hard to hear anything. So I don't think all teachers agree that portables are better than brick and mortar, especially when you have to run heating and air conditioning. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the public? Back to the board.
Yeah, following up on the whole topic of portables, I remember in the past, conversation about that it made sense to buy more portables as opposed to lease portables, but I don't believe we did that at all. I'm talking about 10 years ago. I don't know, I'm trying to remember the reason, if we didn't have any funds, but we did do some things at that point. And I remember we bought all those furnaces. So I'm wondering, I mean, I'm trying to remember how this all worked. I do remember that the reason we have all these portables is largely when class size reduction went in. And before that, there were like 30 kids in class or whatever, and then we went to 20. So then we bought portables, at least that's what I was told in the past. So it's not like we're gonna go back to raising class size significantly like that. Just to comment on what Paul said is, I don't see the portable issue as, can we take away some, we've got too many, more that we're spending this money paying for leasing them, and maybe we shouldn't be paying for that money for leasing them, maybe we should buy them, or consider, building a building, which is more of a long-term thing. But then the other part of it is, we've got these 40 and 50-year-old portables. I mean, I remember mice in one of them, and, all that. I don't know why that happened, but, they do have issues at times. They're not necessarily ideal, except for the air conditioning. But I mean, if we're considering air conditioning in the schools, it'd be good to sort of think about this in terms of, the financial and the big picture issues for these portables. So that's also kind of a question to you. I mean, Adam just said, well, 3 would be 600,000. It seems like it'd be less than that. I think he said 45,000 to 85,000 or whatever. If you bought portables instead of leased them, somebody could run the numbers on, does that make sense, and for how many, and what would we want to do where? I think it's worth considering. And I would love to hear a little more about that. I don't know if you want to say anything about that now, or that's for a future meeting. But it's, we don't get $13 million every day, any day, any year. This is this has been 10 years in coming, this $13 million, these Pulte funds. So I think we need to really think really thoughtfully about it. I know you have in the task force, but I'm just saying, before we actually make decisions, I think that is something we need a little more information on. And then with that, I would just say, so what would be the next step on our process? I'm not sure.
So I guess as not necessarily a task force thing for those in the room, on the portables, I'll say that, just so we're clear, the ones that we're leasing don't comprise the total number of portables, right? And I believe the ones we lease are the ones with air. We don't necessarily own the lots that have air. So it's not, what's being said is, there's some generalities. So replacing the ones we have that we're using isn't necessarily gonna replace all of the aging portables that staff and students and other folks are not necessarily comfortable or enjoying their experience in. So just so we're, the least ones are the nice ones, so.
I've been looking through this report, this is Master Facilities Plan from June, looking for that. You know, it does tell you 13 leased, 17 owned, and then, you know, it's like in different places, it's not easy to find, but then it does tell you in one place, you know, lists each school is, Del Rey, for example, is 54-year-old, 2 24-year-old and 4 54-year-old portable classrooms. Or it has 3 40-year-old classrooms. Somewhere else it said there was X amount that really should be replaced because they're over. You know, it's not very clear in this report, honestly. There's a certain amount that should be replaced because they're over 40 years old or whatever. I don't know how they determine which ones. It sounds like it's just based on age, and that doesn't really make sense because, or maybe it does. There isn't a lot of detail here, and it's sort of all over the place. But I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
So where I was going is, given the fact that there are some that should just be kind of folded up and basically roll away, and then others, to Adam's point, to others, I do think replacement is definitely something that should be considered. I personally, as a board member and as a human being, and as a father and a builder at heart, would never vote for buying new portables. They're just not the best environment for learning or really doing much of anything. It's not an indoor environment that I would condone putting more children in. So that's just personally speaking, and I understand the cost-benefit analysis, but I also understand the cost-benefit of replacing brick and mortar, because if we truly want space in this district, then we should probably be working with our community to generate that space in a permanent fashion so that 100 years from now, they're not using portables or even talking about them. Would be my
And
personal
that's
bent.
a very different conversation than
Yes,
let's replace a 54-year-old portable with a new portable.
totally is. But it's also, in my mind, kind of the same conversation of we have a need, right? We have a need of space that we want kids to learn in and staff to teach in. And what do we need to do as far as a board or a district or a community and making sure those spaces are the right spaces as longer term as possible, so.
Well, and that's what I love about the, going back up to the 50,000 foot level. I mean, that's what I love about your report here, is that it focuses on kids, it focuses on transparently using the funds, and it focuses on generating goodwill with the kids in the community. And it doesn't necessarily focus on, you know, return on investment on each individual project, because the reality is in our district, we return investment by making kids happy and parents donating more money, or passing more parcel taxes, or doing whatever they want to do. So that's how we grow, by making an excellent learning environment for kids. And so that's, and that's what I love about this report. So thank you so much for that. And the nitty-gritty discussion of how you implement all that, I think is much muddier, and will be ongoing, but I really appreciate what everyone did putting this together. And again, the process of gathering input and making this all happen so far.
I had one other item. A question was raised during public comment in terms of the Wagon Ranch nature area. I think there, the sentence of these expenditures will be within the restrictions established by the facilities fund, whether it's the $100,000 for elementary or $200 for OIS or any matching for that site. The intent there was that the district would have restricted facility-minded funds, so it's not for something that isn't really truly going to affect the grounds, or it doesn't meet the restricted needs of this Pulte funding. And to clarify that the matching, it's really, this goes to the piece that we heard at a couple sites of, when you put it out there, the community at large in Orinda can raise some money, and the district, the task force recommended that if the community raises some money, that the district would match it. That was the recommendation. So whether that's coming from one individual that drops off a chest on his way down the Highway 24, or who knows how it gets here, but it's that was the thought there, to kind of challenge Orinda to step up there.
And going back to the original discussion briefly, I agree with you. I think portables are so ugly, really. I went to one school, I can't remember where it was, somewhere in Marin, and like the entire school, except for the office, it was like all portable. It was really bad. But, I would rather replace them with buildings, but on the other hand, you're sitting there with all these old portables. So how do you just say, okay, well, because having a discussion about replacing things like that with structures, you're really talking about a bond. You're not, this money wouldn't come close.
This could jumpstart something like that.
So
Or
how do you,
piece- or a piece
so
of
do you
this
say,
thing.
okay, we'll just put that discussion off? Is that what we, continue the conversation on that? And
Well, I think the task force recognized that it was a bigger fish to fry. This amount of money was not. So that's why it was noted as such. It wasn't that there's not a need, but it's that, you spend all this and more going there. And there's a lot of needs that the sites have right now, that are just, crumbly situations.
And I appreciate, Matt, what you were saying way earlier about, not just saying, okay, we have to replace every door. Maybe it is 90% of the doors or 20% of the doors at a particular site. So I appreciate that, that bottom line item that you put in there about making decisions that actually aren't just a blanket decision, but are based on, the actual needs. To me, this is like sort of an initial conversation. Where do we go from here? I personally would like to see the
added list.
projects, the added list. So I think that's like an important first step for us to.
This was I don't know if you were here, the handful of items that were added to appendix by Ed and staff.
And then Julie, the other point is,
Does he have those?
Are those things that were brought up at the meetings, or what?
Yes.
the only other thing I was gonna say, Julie, is that, This also, what we're talking about right now, ties into one of our district goals. And that is, you know, I think we've established a certain point to create a timeline on where we go from here as well. So I just want to make sure we throw that in at some point in this discussion, that this does tie in with the district goal.
So does Ed have copies?
Right, he doesn't have copies of this, he could read off.
Share it.
this.
Okay.
Come on through it.
Please.
Read off the list?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Delray. Remove asbestos floor tile in the kitchen. Repair the dry rot on the roof rafters. Repair and replace the hallway roof canopies. Repair and replace the breezeway roofs. Replace main underground galvanized water line. Replace the clear story windows that overhang from the classrooms. And repair and replace the dry rot exterior wall on Route 21 portal.
So Ed, if I can just ask a question, because those items, a lot of them sound like things that were already in the appendix, so I thought this was, so are these sort of highlights from there?
Yeah, mine are highlights from the appendix, and the other ones were, the one I think Matt was referring to, the principals list, that were not in the appendix.
So what we had done was asterisk the items that Ed just read off that are not on the priority project list.
Okay, so these were listed on the other,
No, not
In a
necessarily.
different column?
So for example, under the priority list, I'm not looking at it right now, but on the priority list is breezeway roofs, dry rot rafters. I'm not sure, I'm not looking at Appendix E for Delray right now, but is asbestos kitchen tiles? Yeah.
okay, so this is sort of, so these are items taken from
Some are, some aren't.
somewhere.
So wait, by saying you're asterisk them, what does that mean? You made those a priority?
No, just, that was the truly, we asterisked them at the time we talked about it.
What does the asterisk indicate?
The asterisk indicated that they were items that were not on the priority list that were on what we were calling in the working process, Ed's list. And that's what is denoted in this.
Okay, but those were things that should be done.
Correct.
Okay.
And that the committee is recommending be done, exactly.
Okay, so wait, this bullet says all other facility projects in Appendix E with the addition of the facility projects recently presented and/or identified by the Director of Facilities.
For example, in Appendix E, under Delray School, item number 14, it's listed as an other project. R&R breezeway roofs. It's listed as an other project.
Mhm.
What we're recommending is, because what we're calling that is an item, a project recently presented and/or identified by the Director of Facilities and Site Administration. That's one of those items. Item number 14 in Appendix E, R&R breezeway roofs.
So should the recommendation say all other facilities projects? So this is really a way of identifying facilities projects that weren't originally put in the priority.
Exactly, because the next one is item number 16. Replace main underground galvanized water lines with copper in the asphalt and concrete. Item number 17 was under safety that Ed just read, R&R clear story windows in all classrooms.
But the new list does not include redoing the bathrooms, because that's already listed on their priority list.
So I'm a little confused. The priority list, I know we have a priority list identified, but does this, Tyson, does your report say that you're recommending doing all the priority list? I understand what you just said about asterisking other projects in other lists, but what about the priority projects? are those automatically asterisked or not? Are those,
So all other facilities projects, so this would be basically anything on that appendix
mhm,
and additions, which there are a few ed projects, maybe Delray doesn't have one. But there were a few things that you shared with the group that are not in that appendix, but that were needed to have happen. We are
I
retaining
guess
wall.
that's the information library.
Right, yes, so there are a handful of projects that we
Other
just,
projects.
which I'm trying to drill
but
into
that's not the confusing part. The
I couldn't find
confusing
it.
part is, does your bullet point say that you're recommending all projects? No, on this appendix, or does it? I'm confused now.
So, outside of fencing
What, yeah, okay.
and outside of portables,
Uh-huh.
portable related items or removal thereof, I think pretty much yes. And it's saying there are more items, right? So
Yes,
what we
yes,
didn't want to
okay.
do is list out the entire appendix, right? Line by line.
Yeah, I understand.
Because we had temperature, climate control issues, we had bathrooms, we had
Right,
maintenance, we had, I mean, there were a lot of other important pieces, but we didn't want to leave off the appendix or start
right.
needling into the details of which goes first or.
And I guess what
Okay.
I was trying
What
to
item,
hear
what?
from Ed was
What
for
are the
just
other
those
items?
items that weren't, that have come up since the appendix was created. So I don't know if the Florida outdoor
But yeah, I've got,
classroom, if that's considered.
No.
No.
I'm
I
wondering.
mean, for the most part, if it's something that falls into the camp of these other topics, it's
Mhm.
probably not. This is more things that facility came up with that didn't make it into this document. So it's gonna be things that are either safety driven or structural or deferred maintenance type for the most part. And I'm gonna see if I can find it here.
Do you have that list, or is that something that we can,
I just have the list of,
just
with everything that I gave.
so we can.
And what about door locks? Is that on this list? They've already been done? Okay, well, I think that there was some question about, you know, are they what we want? Are they adequate? I do remember the staff person bringing that up at one of the meetings that I happened to be at. But you don't have that on your list, door locks.
No, yes.
Okay, well, I've got one other question about the list in general. We do have these items like, you know, replace all windows with double pane and insulate and air condition all buildings. Is that sort of, I remember you saying something about being reasonable, but what about those areas? Those relate to the energy efficiency and,
I think Matt was talking about that before.
What was the
The
question?
She's asking about the insulation and,
those are on the list. Insulate all buildings, yada, yada.
What's the
What we're
question?
doing, so what was the task force recommendation about that type of thing? Those are on the list. Are you saying we should do that, or?
Yes,
Okay, we should do that?
yes.
Huh.
But again, not from just insulate everything mindset or, you know, replace every door mindset, but figure out exactly what the needs are
Mhm,
for the space and then apply
mhm.
funds accordingly, because this goes back to the explanation that the round numbers in this total school solution deal are round numbers. But it is important to note that those inherently, a lot of these play off each other.
Mhm.
You don't want to do one first or the other one, or not explore one at all.
Okay.
Who knows?
That makes sense. So that sounds like, in terms of process, that this needs to get refined more or something? What would be the next step on a process for this?
well, I think we should bring it back. Because I appreciate what Matt was saying about the goal of getting things done and having a timeline, but I feel like, you know, this is seen the task force report, we've had a lot of questions answered, but I'm sure as we sort of think about it over the next, days and weeks, that more thoughts will come to our minds and we'll, be able to proceed. So my thought is doing that at the next
Tyson,
meeting.
do you think there'd be value in sharing maybe kind of what we talked about at our last task force meeting about ways these numbers would get refined?
Sure.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. So, I mean, because it was part of the debate is how does the task force put a recommendation? Do we include dollars and cents? Are we trying to come up with exactly 13.2? And, a few of the members did a very awesome job in putting up a straw man and saying, here's where the numbers lie, and here's where the priorities are of what they've seen. So I think we did kind of get there as a group, but we didn't inherently make it all about the money, because it was more about let's gather the data, and then the dollars, to Matt's question, are going to refine themselves in the sense of how the district needs to approach it. There's going to be certain scopes of work that make sense to go globally across the district and try and get every single item addressed in one fell swoop, because that's going to be the economy. Or it may make more sense to really be surgical on the need per site. And so the numbers are going to reflect how that bid process goes and how the orchestration and the timeline of execution. And that's to one of the next steps after, it's probably 3 steps from now or 2 steps from now, is having really the administration come up with a timeline and approach to whether it's a priority to happen during the summer is one part of the equation, or quick hits that can happen over break times, or this is a bigger issue that we need to plan for, say, a year from now. I mean, however, or they need more input. So I think the timeline piece that's coming, probably March, April timeframe as a district goal. Between now and then, a lot of numbers on some of these priority things are probably going to start going along their process to come back to the board as bids, or come back to the board as a proposal to go see, whether it's an RFP, right, or really getting the administration to weigh in what they see best as a next step on any given line item.
So do we want to give that kind of direction now, or do we want to discuss this more before we do that?
And then could you touch the PMCN piece?
In terms of, so there was one discussion was, there's some items that Ed and his group know exactly what needs to get done, just categorically.
Floor tiles in the kitchen and
They
all
could
that.
bid it out, or they could write the scope of work, or get 3 numbers and move on, right, and just execute. And there's others that it may warrant more of a survey. I mean, I'd say the biggest picture here is the temperature and climate study, right? That's something that, in order to get the right solution at the end of the day and know what the dollars and cents of it are, you need to scope that to the earlier agenda item. And by scoping that, you have to get some data on what you're trying to accomplish. The restrooms, setting up an example there is there's probably a restroom out there that works, that's great, that everybody likes, and kids will go use it, and so will staff and any visitors. And it's like, let's go find that one and then figure out a way, scope-wise, right, whether we need the help of an outside consultant to do it, just give it bandwidth, or have a contractor come out and just say, well, in order to hit this as the benchmark, do a survey and pay for their time at, hundreds of bucks an hour, or whatever it is, to categorically come up with, in order to get every bathroom looking like this one needs this one needs this one needs this, and then you've got a scope that then the district can either execute onesie-twosie or go out and roll out. So there's some inherent discussions in terms of, one, giving the flexibility to the district getting behind the administration to get the bandwidth they need to function and move things forward, but also in the way in which they want to execute it. Because there are some items that it's going to be better to go grab and just get these 4, doors knocked out over Christmas because they're going to fall off the hinges, as opposed to bid them as part of 60, to use an example.
Well, again, I guess the question is, do you want to give some direction now, or, do we want to wait and see? I mean, I think, I think the board, 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 I think question, trustee Monahan, sorry.
Well, so my initial thought is that we ask staff to give us direction on what they see as next steps.
So could I, I think what you need to do as a board is decide, do you want this recommendation sheet brought back for you to approve? You've all shared some comments about it, but to move forward, do you agree with these recommendations or don't? You don't have to decide that tonight, but we need to know whether to bring that back to you or not. So we need to know where you stand
That's
as a
a
board
first.
on the recommendations. And then, if there's anything else, if you want us to bring that back, tell us. If there are other things you want us to bring back in addition to that, tell us. Or is there something else you want us to bring back, so we know where to go next? I don't think we have to work on all these other details right now. What we need to know is, where do you stand on this report? And I don't mean you to tell us that tonight, but at the next meeting, maybe.
Yeah, so, and that's sort of the way I think I envisioned it, is the task force would do their work, bring us a report, and then the following month, we could potentially take action on a report. So I would be in favor of bringing this document back for potential action next month.
So we might want to find out how many others agree.
Well, I think that probably makes three, unless Jason and unless.
We don't have to
Well-
say.
Yeah, no, I-
Just because they worked on the task force, I mean, there's a lot of, we had a lot of
I'm guessing
conversation
their
here
names.
already tonight. They may want some additional information brought back.
But it would just come back as an action item.
Well, I heard that is a first step. Is-
Yeah, that's
is
the
do
first
we,
step, exactly.
do we as a board, is there consensus that this document should be brought back for action in any regard, is what I heard.
Well, and I
support that as well.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that if that is done, that it's gonna get a little more specific in the dollars, is that correct? No?
That's not correct. That'll be down the road. Right
Oh,
now,
that'll be down the road.
right now, we're trying to decide how much of this report,
Uh-huh.
all of it or parts of it, you're willing to support, so then we can take those next steps to do that. We're not gonna go down and do all that other investigation if you don't support it in the first place. It's not high priority. So what we wanna find out is, of this report, how much of it do you support? And then we know where we can go after that and the subsequent.
Okay, so we won't have it won't be any more detailed, but we also could end up between now and then, I mean, deciding, we want to tweak this or that or whatever. It's not like an all or nothing thing at all.
That's what
Okay.
you would decide next time. We would bring the report back. It sounds like there's a consensus of all of you to bring it back, and then you can do what you want to it next time. You either approve it or change it.
Yeah, well, I want to add a couple things. I think that's fine. We obviously have the support for that. But we did have a lot of discussion about portables, for example. I would like to sort of, I don't know, whatever you think, Joe, is appropriate, but I would like to have a little more information on the whole portable discussion. And also, I don't remember if there's anything about seismic in here. I mean, once we're talking about portables, and Julie brought up, there's also longer-term issues, I'd like to remember or just understand, do we have any seismic issues? Are those in here, or are we not addressing that, or
So
what?
why don't we take one thing at a time?
Okay.
You're saying you'd like to have more information on portables.
Mhm.
So does the rest of the board endorse that you want to have more information on portables?
I feel like we have all the information in the facilities plan and the update on portables.
But as far as having, we can discuss, what to do when we move to take action on this report. So, Joe said it's
Yeah, this
not
opens
all or
up.
nothing.
This opens up the opportunity to address it.
So, right, portables are addressed in here.
Yeah, well, we talked around it. It didn't feel like, I guess what I was just wanting a clearer, I guess I can ask Joe later, I just wanted a clearer understanding of how many of our portables are actually problematic, because it's not that clear from this report, but I can ask him later.
Okay, and then the other,
Then you brought up seismic.
Right.
So what do you want to know about seismic, and do the rest of you want to know know that too, or
Well, I think Ed shared with the group in the task force what seismic things have been taken care of, and then from a categorical safety consideration, a lot of the safety items or some of the other projects, if not some of the priority projects, all fall into structural related types of improvements, whether it's dry rot, whether it's awnings, whether it's the windows themselves. So I guess I'm not sure what else.
What I'm asking?
Yeah, what else
Well, I'm sort
there?
of saying, so if we have a big earthquake, are we worried about buildings falling down, or what, have we already taken care of that for the most part?
I'm always worried about buildings
Yeah.
falling down myself when we have big earthquakes, but
I mean, this is a facility discussion, so I don't remember seeing it in here, but I didn't read this all over again. But I'm just wondering about that in general.
so I don't know that, I guess,
I mean, that goes back to the 2008 master
Yeah.
facilities plan.
That's what it says.
and there were-
That's what the seismic is in that
Yes.
report? All right, well, I'll look at that
Okay.
later. Okay, and then I had one other thing, door locks did come up, in terms of the safety issues, in terms of fencing, gates, and door locks, that seems like it's more of a district level thing as opposed to site specific, but I think that's something that, I would like to better understand what door locks do we have, we haven't really discussed that as a board, and what door locks do we have, and is that what we want, because that is the most obvious safety thing that we could be doing, as opposed to, we've already approved, in the June meeting, more money for cameras, for, surveillance cameras. We didn't approve fences and gates. Where are we with door locks? I would like to know that better. And I could also ask you separately if you want, but that's, to me, related to all of these lists.
Yeah,
Are you guys interested in that?
well, I'm interested, but I know that there's a lot of doors out there that don't even
I'm
comply
talking
right
about,
now.
I'm talking about classroom.
No, I'm talking about them too, there's doors that need to be replaced, and I would assume they would get the
new door.
approved door lock.
Well, sure, but we could
So-
also replace all the doors. That doesn't mean we've looked at door locks in the doors that we're not replacing. I'm just saying. I'm not,
Are there 3 board members who want?
if you only address door locks in the doors you're replacing, it depends on how many doors you're replacing, which we don't know at this time. But then you've possibly
I guess I'm under
upgraded a
the-
certain number of classrooms, but not all.
I'm under the impression, and would want confirmation that we've addressed our door lock situation to the degree of safety that's required. We don't have doors that aren't locked, and we don't have doors that don't work in a safety situation. That would be my question, whether the
Well, sure, we
specific
have
lock,
doors that-
and whether somebody can use it or not, or,
We have doors that lock. What I heard in one meeting is they have to put in a key and whatever, and as a board member, I don't really know what we have. And I know that's a big, hot topic in safety with all the school shootings and whatever. And it's just, we've already approved $15,000 to do surveillance cameras. We considered fences and gates and we didn't. I just want to know, where are we with door locks? I know at Miramani, they had some thing they were putting in the door that you could just quickly pull the thing out, then the door is locked. And if there was an intruder, the teacher could do it just like that, and it was really easy and really safe. I don't know what we have here, so I would like to know what we have, and, I'd like to know more information.
3 board members.
Take a sec.
Wanting this.
I guess I was at that meeting, and I've heard it once,
Mhm.
and I've talked to a lot of different people, and no one else has brought it up. And I've talked to other people at other districts about locks and doors and
So tell me
security.
what,
So I don't
sit here
have
and
a
argue
concern.
with you, I'm just
No, I guess
saying.
I'm just saying, I don't really understand what you're asking for.
So what kind of door, well,
I don't think we have
we don't have time to get into the
consensus
detail.
of people who want, board members who want to continue.
Okay, I'll ask Joe that later.
Okay. So if we have no other discussion on this?
Well, so I would say that of the recommendations, I mean, given what we heard on the earlier agenda item, that those items that are in the appendix or that are related to facilities and from an energy and or lighting and or just inherent controls type situation, including the temperature and climate control, I think, you know, to lose an entire month to just bring this list back and then discuss further, I mean, in my personal opinion, those items sound like the district could, given the opportunity, advance something or at least get a little more traction on their knowledge of where those fit in Prop 39 and available funds, and if there's a consultant out.
More than just the energy audit items that we.
Expanding on really the planning piece that next step on that one would take. So I just put it out there that I don't want to lose 31 days or more or less on that track towards Prop 39 and planning, personally, as an individual board member.
So which specific on
I
the
think
temperature and?
Temperature and indoor climate control, as well as those items that would
You're talking
fortunately or unfortunately run parallel to energy and or.
Are you talking about the table A recommended energy efficiency project for 5 schools that we're talking about?
I'm talking about where that relates to the facility items and specifically gathering more data so that we can, as a district, understand where we are with our student and staff's comfort, temperature, and so I guess what I'm specifically talking about is where this report overlaps with that in terms of priorities or
So you're,
funding source options.
so are you talking about giving direction on like the temperature study?
Partially. That would be one of
And
the items.
funding,
Or at least
okay,
just
do we have-
advancing it in any way to see if we can not lose a month, if that's a priority.
okay, do we have a consensus on that?
That makes perfect sense to me.
What's the cost, you know,
No cost.
that part?
Might be some, might be not. I mean,
I didn't think you were talking about spending any money.
well, I think there's some avenues that you can go no cost, but there's others that would be a consultant that would do something. So it's a matter of probably having the district explore what's out there and get back to us before we
That's what I
lose a
thought you
whole
were saying.
other month.
Okay, so
Without spending any money, is what I think.
Right now,
Right, right, yeah.
but understand what is out there.
so give direction, so we have a consensus to give direction on having the district look at what options there are. I just want clarity
Yeah,
for how we're
Looking
directing.
at options for gathering, whether it's data or recommendations or a combination thereof on the climate, interior climate within our school
Okay,
sites.
so we have a consensus on that?
Yes, I agree.
So
Anything
I
else?
think the only other piece was just if there's inherent parallels between the 287 or 261 after the fact, those items and what are on the other and priority project lists, if there's overlap there, that it'd be nice to have, I guess, more clarity to that overlap in the next month, just from our own understanding as a district of what items are in this report that we purchased and what items are identified by the district. Where do those line up already?
So what have we already approved, basically, from,
What is recommended for approval versus what is recommended for energy?
okay, do we have a consensus on that as well?
That makes a lot of sense to me.
I want to clarify that, because I understand what was recommended in the report already. And so you want us to bring back a list of things that were already recommended.
No, I think what I'm trying to understand is where we have something in the appendix that lines right with the energy
Energy
plan
audit.
that was done in terms of identifying those opportunities. So that we're not mutually counting money over here and counting money over here. Or if one of these items expands and says, you know what, well, why is our budget misaligned? Just a little further clarity to bring those two parts together. And it's probably not a consultant, it's
So
the
you're
district.
saying, so you're saying some of these things may be on some of our appendix?
Okay. Because, for instance, an item would be lighting in the library at Wagner, replacement, right? That's on a list somewhere.
And that's
There's
gonna be
also-
part of that.
There's also lighting in the breezeways that's on a list somewhere, and lighting is a concept that we're exploring. Another would be
It's related to the energy.
Energy.
items that are related to energy, because I just want to make sure we don't lose traction on the planning effort, so that when other things take its time in the next few months, because there won't be any of those.
So we have a consensus on that as well?
Yeah, I think we can integrate the two plans, or at least clarify what's what.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Those were the low hanging.
Well, there was
This
one other,
is- Okay.
well, I don't know if this is the time, but remember we were talking about the district office and solar, and you said, let's move on and we'll come back to that. So it seems like we're almost done with this. Maybe we should go back to that now, or what?
Okay. Do we, and what's your thought?
Well, we were talking about asking, I have to remember where we were.
We could have staff report out just what options there are and what's been talked about during the project meetings, or where we are in terms of schedule, and I would love to hear where we are with the project, outside of all the other stuff, but,
It's off topic.
No,
sorry.
the next meeting, we're talking about,
But
right?
in terms of understanding where the opportunity lies to integrate some level of solar into the project, I think that was the question on the table.
Right, that's what we were talking about before. Can we get solar incorporated at the district office?
So do we have a consensus to have staff report back to us
Yep.
on the solar piece?
Report back to us, can we actually ask them to try to pursue it, or do we have to wait for them to report back? Or is that what we're saying? Can we ask staff
I
to?
think finding out where it is the start of the pursuit, so.
Right, so if they find, but can't we direct them to say that we would like to have the building done where the roof would be able to put solar on the roof? Or do we have to wait for them to find out where are we, then they come back in December, then they go back again, it takes a whole month?
So my memory is that we already agreed as a board that we were not gonna make changes to the roof of the district office, solar or no solar. We had that discussion.
With when they were here,
Yeah.
because because I forget why.
Because they'll do change orders and all kinds of good things.
Oh.
That actually would violate our contract, because actually, I think Harold spoke up on that one, or Kelly did.
Yeah, there were no
Yeah.
provisions.
So do we,
Okay.
so,
So it would be,
remind
it
me,
would be
does
an
that
added
mean we
scope
can't do
item.
it? Or does that,
It
what
just
does that mean?
It just means that the roof is the way it is right now, and
Mhm.
if we want to understand what's possible, it's a discussion with the designers to understand what's possible.
Okay, so that
that's
is,
where we're at.
that's where we're at, and so that's why you're saying.
If that's what you
All
want
right.
to know. Is that what you guys want to know?
Yes, we,
So we want to know.
So we have.
we'd like to know.
Is there anything else? Okay.
There's
I
a lot,
really-
but
I really do appreciate all the time that everyone from the task force put in, and just, this is a lot of information and it's a lot for us to digest, so. Okay, a little later than, for such a short-looking agenda. Board reports, anyone?
I have a board report.
Give a handout?
I have a handout. This is a very fast report. last month's meeting, and then left early, and didn't report last month. But, the board, or the bus, program is going very well. We're up, ridership, which is great. That's the breakdown by schools and riders. And you'll notice that, both especially OIS is doing, it's driving a lot of the program. And then,
Hardly fun.
yeah, exactly. And Sleepy Hollow, is also generating a lot of ridership. You'll notice that Glorietta generates very little ridership, and, it, potentially could be at risk of losing its bus. But, the bus, well, it's just,
Until it was like
yeah.
10 before they got.
yeah, Delray already lost its bus. So, it's just, frankly, the only reason Glorietta still has a bus is because, it's able to double run. It runs to Glorietta, and then it runs again. And so eliminating the Glorietta run at this point wouldn't gain anything for the bus program, so. But otherwise, it's going really well, and we're trying to make it efficient. So that's my report.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just wanted to share the Diverse Abilities Awareness Open House. It was awesome. I mean, the kids, I had more kids sharing just with me that I don't even know. I mean, I don't know. And they're coming up to me, did you do this? Oh, you gotta try this. And I mean, it was pretty cool. And then the Andy Shipper was good as usual. If we could only get as many people in our board meetings as come see Andy, we'll put it that way. We probably need to figure that out later, like have a parent ed piece at our board meetings, maybe, I don't know. But anyhow, so hats off to him for doing that work that night, and our director that's MIA at the moment. She did a fantastic job hosting and keeping track of all that.
Anyone else?
Yes, I would just like to say that, as part of the Ledge team, we have started planning the Advocacy Day event this year, and it will be earlier. It'll be the first Friday in February, I believe it's February 7th, yeah. So, I'll send you the date later, but, that planning session is happening, and, a lot of it's, related to Common Core. We're having the discussions about what to have on the agenda. We will be inviting all of our legislators as usual. It's a great day, so look forward to, in the future, more information. And anyone's welcome to come, either to the planning meeting and of course to the event itself.
We do look at it at this point, so.
Okay, any future agenda items? Have a lot of future agendas.
We have one from before, district transfers and residency.
Okay, at this time, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.